Chapter 1912. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Abdullah's fist landed on Lu Ye's chest. Walnut didn't dare to look directly at it. She had long heard of Abdullah's strength. Would Lu Yi be able to withstand this punch? However, she relaxed in the next moment because Lu Yi was able to withstand it. She vaguely saw something flash in front of Lu Ye's chest before Abdullah's fist landed. "Spirit runes?" Walnut exclaimed. She wasn't ignorant. On the contrary, after so many years in the Azura arena, she was much more knowledgeable than the average Yu Yao. However, wasn't the speed at which the spirit runes were constructed a little too quickly? From the looks of it, the spirit runes were probably used for defense. Otherwise, Lu Yi wouldn't have been unharmed. Lu Yi wasn't as calm as he appeared. Abdullah's fist was very hard. Even though he'd protected himself with more than 10 layers of divine defense, the punch still caused his blood to surge. Moreover, this was a weakened attack. One could only imagine what would have happened to him if he hadn't protected himself with divine defense. His body shook slightly before returning to normal. Then he slashed down again. Abdullah's expression changed. He hesitated for a moment between dodging this attack or blocking it. He immediately chose the former. He didn't have much time. With the support of his secret technique, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Therefore, he had to end this battle quickly. He was confident that he wouldn't lose to Yu Yao in terms of physical strength. Even though he sensed that Lu Yi had used spirit runes to block his attack, he still believed that he would be the one to last until the end. Injury for injury. Let's see who gives up first. When the Pan Mountain saber descended, it once again began to vibrate intensely. In the previous battle against Lionheart, Lu Yi had suffered a similar loss. Lionheart had tempered his body to the point that it was too tough. Coupled with the protection of his magic power, Lu Yi found it difficult to break through his opponent's body. Otherwise, Lionheart wouldn't have been able to escape to the island of versatility. He would have been killed long ago in Zixian. Therefore, ever since that battle, Lu Yi had been considering a problem. What would he do if he encountered an opponent like Lionheart in the future? The Pan Mountain blade was sharp enough. With the support of the Divine Edge Spirit runes, it would become even sharper. However, there would always be defenses in this world that he couldn't break through. All this time, he hadn't thought of a good solution. Until one day, he suddenly remembered an item from the mortal world. It was a saw used for logging. Using a wooden saw to chop down a tree, even if it was just a small sapling, it might not succeed. But what if it was sawing back and forth with a wooden saw? Even a towering tree couldn't stop a small wooden saw. Now that he had an idea, the rest was easy. Lu Yi had spent half a year on the journey from the 10,000 Elephant Sea to the Azura Star Field. He had thought that this was just a simple trick, so it wouldn't be difficult to perfect it. However, as he explored deeper, he realized that it wasn't easy to do so. When fighting against a strong opponent, there was a limit to the amount of time the Pan Mountain blade could make contact with the enemy's body. If he wanted to break through the enemy's defense, he had to complete his plan in that instant. For this reason, Lu Yi spent a lot of time and effort. After many attempts, he finally managed to barely complete it before arriving at the Azura Star region. This was no longer a simple trick. Strictly speaking, this was a kind of saber technique. Lu Yi named it Vibrating Blade. Lu Yi immediately noticed that Abdullah's physique was even stronger than Lionheart's, so ordinary methods couldn't break through his defenses. Only Vibrating Blade had hope. Sure enough, he was pleasantly surprised. Even Abdullah's physique couldn't withstand Vibrating Blade's attacks. To him, as long as he could injure the enemy, victory was basically decided. Abdullah's method of exchanging injury for injury was exactly what he wanted. The battle suddenly became fierce. Two figures moved and flipped in the battle arena. Sabers and fists intersected. After half an incense stick's worth of time, Abdullah suddenly jumped back and raised his hand. "I'm done." Lu Yi, who was about to give chase, stopped and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He had also suffered some internal injuries in that fierce battle, but they weren't serious. The main problem was that his blood was surging and he couldn't suppress it. On the other hand, Abdullah had countless wounds all over his body. His entire body was dripping with blood. At this moment, The corners of Abdullah's eyes twitched violently. The reason he dared to exchange injury for injury with Lu Yi was that his physique was stronger than Lu Ye's and his recovery speed was faster. With his powerful physique, these superficial wounds didn't affect him at all and could be healed in the blink of an eye. However, what puzzled him was that the injuries on his body showed no signs of recovery at all. Under careful observation, he could even sense a strange power around his wounds. It was this power that was hindering the recovery of his injuries. Admittedly, these injuries looked miserable, but they didn't affect him much. However, he couldn't hold on any longer. The duration of his secret technique was about to end. At that time, without the support of the 5 transformations, his strength would be greatly weakened and he wouldn't be Lu Ye's opponent at all. Retreating at the right time was his only choice. In the stands, Tianyan was gloating. That dog just used me as an excuse, now he's tasting the bitter fruit, huh? He had experienced it personally and knew the consequences of being injured by Lu Ye's saber. I concede, Abdullah shouted, his figure disappearing as soon as he finished speaking. After a brief moment of shock, the many cultivators in the stands suddenly burst into a burst of exclamations. Huado jumped 3 feet into the air. She won. Moreover, the benefits of this victory would definitely be greater than before because there were too many cultivators watching this battle. Even if only a small portion of them placed their bets, how many of them would bet on Lu Yi like her and her master? Abdullah was defeated. Abdullah, who had always competed with Gu Sheng for the top of the Moon Jade ranking and was invincible except for Gu Sheng, was defeated by a weapon cultivator who popped out of nowhere. Before this, almost no one had seen this weapon cultivator of the human clan. This kind of shock made all the cultivators watching the battle unable to recover for a long time. Then, they thought of something even more exciting. Now that the weapon cultivator of the human clan had defeated Abdullah and risen to 2nd place on the Moon Jade ranking, would he continue to challenge Gu Sheng? Could he defeat him? If he could, wouldn't it mean that the true top of the Moon Jade ranking was about to be born? From now on, no one would be able to shake his position? Countless cultivators scrambled to send messages, inquiring about the weapon cultivator of the human clan. Unfortunately, because Lu Yi hid his name and origin in the arena, no one knew where he came from or what his name was. In the arena, as Abdullah's figure disappeared, Lu Ye's figure also quickly disappeared, returning to his cave residence. On the other side, Abdullah suddenly appeared in Gu Sheng's cave residence. Gu Sheng was still lying there in his underpants. Sensing Abdullah's aura, he said with some dissatisfaction, "What took you so long? Has Tianyan become stronger?" He knew Tianyan's strength very well. Tianyan would sometimes challenge him because he was 2nd on the Moon Jade ranking. Logically speaking, Abdullah should not have needed so much time to deal with Tianyan unless Tianyan had become much stronger. However, this was not impossible. In this Azura field, it was common for people to suddenly obtain a fortuitous encounter and greatly increase their strength. Abdullah didn't know how to speak. When he received the challenge, he said something about going and coming back, but he was beaten up violently when he went. Gu Sheng suddenly sensed that something was wrong. Because with Abdullah's return, the cave residence was filled with a thick bloody smell. He turned his head to look, and his eyes widened. He slowly got up and sized Abdullah up for a while, then he was extremely shocked. Tianyan is so strong now? How did he beat you up like this? At this moment, Abdullah's aura was somewhat weak. This was undoubtedly the aftereffect of using a secret technique. Moreover, his entire body was covered in wounds. The flesh and blood of those wounds were overturned, and blood flowed as if it couldn't be stopped. He looked extremely miserable. Tianyan is nothing. Abdullah curled his lips. It's not Tianyan? Gu Sheng was stunned, then immediately realized. No, Tianyan doesn't use weapons. Your injuries really weren't left by Tianyan. He hurriedly took out the Azura token to check, then looked up in shock. You lost. Gu Sheng was shocked. When he saw Abdullah's injuries, he was somewhat gloating because he had never seen him like this before. But after checking the Yu Yao ranking, he was shocked to find that Abdullah had fallen to 3rd place. A person he had never seen before had replaced Abdullah's ranking. Who is this person? Gu Sheng asked. Abdullah scratched his face. I don't know where he came from. You were beaten up like this and you don't know his name? I was too excited and forgot to ask. Abdullah was slightly embarrassed, then he waved his hand. I'm injured, but he's not much better. My 2 iron fists hammered him until he spat out 3 liters of blood and was heavily injured. If it wasn't for my secret technique's time being up, I wouldn't have lost to him. Gu Sheng glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. So he's supporting himself with a heavily injured body and didn't rest at all before challenging me? He challenged you? Abdullah asked in shock. Gu Sheng nodded. He was now first place on the Yu Yao ranking, so the only person he could challenge was the second place. Abdullah's eyes darted around, then he urged, Don't panic, he's very strong, but after fighting with me he's less than 1/10 of his strength. You go and kill him, I'll wait here to celebrate with you. Gu Sheng frowned as he looked at him. Although he felt that Abdullah was exaggerating, he understood Abdullah's strength. He didn't believe that someone on the Yu Yao ranking could take down Abdullah without any injuries. So, it was true that Abdullah was injured, but he didn't know how much strength he had left. It just so happened that he was also heavily injured, so neither of them could take advantage of the other. Moreover, as the first place, there was no reason for him not to accept a challenge. He immediately nodded and said, Then I'll be right back. As he spoke, he put on his clothes, accepted the challenge, and disappeared. Abdullah stood in place and sniffed, then grimaced. End of chapter. Chapter 1913. Abdalluo did not have to wait for long. In just half an incense stick's time, Gu Sheng's figure reappeared in the cave, covered in blood. He cursed at Abdalluo, Are you F*King sick in the head? Didn't he say that he would smash the opponent until he had less than 1/10 of his strength left? Although he knew that Abdalluo was exaggerating, he did not expect him to be bluffing. There was not a single trace of injury on the human cultivator's body. Moreover, after using his Fa Li, his speed was extremely fast. On the other hand, Gu Sheng, who was heavily injured, could not dodge at all. After fighting for a while, he was forced out of the cave by a few slashes. If Gu Sheng was at his peak, he would not have lost so quickly. His strength was on par with Abdalluo's. If Abdalluo was not a match for the human cultivator, he probably would not have been able to either. However, he should have been able to hold on for a while. In the end, he was the one who suffered a few slashes and was bleeding profusely. He did not even manage to find out the other party's strength. Abdalluo turned a deaf ear to Gu Sheng's curses. He frowned and pondered for a long time before he said in surprise, So he really did not use his full strength. When he fought with Lu Yi, he had a feeling that Lu Ye's strength was increasing step by step as he used the Savage Beast transformation. The other party did not seem to be in a hurry to determine the victor. He seemed to want to hone himself in such a battle. This was not unusual. Basically, many experts who were confident in their strength would do this when faced with a suitable opponent. Abdalluo did the same when he fought for the first time. Because it was difficult to find an opponent, he enjoyed every battle with an expert. The most obvious evidence was the strange blade technique that his opponent had used. It was a powerful blade technique that could injure him, a berserker who had practiced the ancient techniques. His opponent could have used it right from the start, but he did not. It was only when his opponent realized that his strength could no longer improve that he began to use a heavy blow. Before that, he had maintained a state of being evenly matched with his opponent to fight against him. If the other party could do this, it meant that the other party's limit was higher and stronger than his. Abdalluo's eyes lit up. All this time, he had been digging deep into Yu Yao's potential. If not for this, with his foundation he would have been promoted to Rizhao long ago. He could feel that he still had potential that had not been dug out, but because there was no suitable opponent, he could not do as he wished. However, the appearance of the human tribe's weapon cultivator had given him a glimmer of hope. If the human tribe's weapon cultivator could be so strong, why couldn't he? A sound came from the side. It was Gu Sheng who had fallen onto the bed. His old injuries had yet to heal, and now there were new ones. Gu Sheng felt very tired. Most importantly, he could already feel that there was a strange power entangling around his wounds, hindering his recovery. Countless cultivators were shaken in the Yu Yao battlefield. There was no other reason. Gu Sheng and Abd Luo's era of dominating the Yu Yao ranking had come to an end. Ever since these two fellows came to the Azura battlefield, only the two of them had taken turns to occupy the top spot. The others simply didn't have the qualifications. Until today, he had been replaced by a human weapon cultivator of unknown origin. This person first fought Abd Luo. After a fierce battle, Abd Luo was no match for him and voluntarily admitted defeat. After that, he immediately fought Gu Sheng. His victory against Gu Sheng was a clean one. The spectating cultivators could all see that Gu Sheng seemed to be heavily injured, so he was unable to display much of his strength. That human weapon cultivator could defeat Abd Luo in his peak condition, so naturally, defeating the heavily injured Gu Sheng would be a piece of cake. A new era had arrived. Countless people wanted to know the identity and origin of the new weapon cultivator. Unfortunately, because Lu Yi had not been in the Azura battlefield for long, he had not interacted with many people in depth, so the information he could gather was pitifully little. At the same time, in the cave residence, Lu Yi rested for a moment before receiving a message from Walnut. Walnut wanted to meet him at the plaza of the treasury. Lu Yi was instantly filled with anticipation. After fighting in the battlefield for so long, it was finally time to split the spoils. He took out the Azura token and appeared in the treasury with a thought. Just as he steadied himself, he heard a familiar voice from the side. "Over here!" Lu Yi turned his head and saw Walnut waving at him while jumping up and down. Beside her stood a dignified woman. He had seen this woman before. Every time Walnut entered the battlefield, this woman was always with her, so their relationship must be quite extraordinary. Lu Yi stepped forward and nodded at Walnut, then looked at the woman. Walnut introduced her. "This is my master." Lu Yi's heart trembled. Walnut had Yu Yao's cultivation, so her master must be Rizhao. The woman smiled. "My name is Nan Lian." Lu Yi bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Nan Lian smiled. "You're quite good." She had been in the battlefield for so many years, but she had never seen someone so pleasing to the eye. Thanks to Lu Yi, she was now quite wealthy. Of course, this was only secondary. The main reason was that during the process of betting with Lu Yi, she had experienced the joy of squandering money like it was dirt. If she won, her net worth would skyrocket, but if she lost, everything would come to an end. This was extremely helpful in tempering her mental state. Walnut excitedly said, "Fellow Taoist, take a guess. According to the Azura contract, how many Azura seals will you get this time?" Lu Yi could tell from her expression that she had gained quite a bit, so she casually said, 1,000,000? Walnut smiled and raised 3 slender fingers. More than 3,670,000. This was also because she had too little starting capital and not enough people had bet on the last battle. Otherwise, she would have won even more. Looking at all of Lu Yi's fights, the one she won the most was undoubtedly the fight between Lu Yi and Abdullah. In that fight, apart from a few strange people who placed their bets on Lu Yi, only the master and disciple pair had placed their bets on Abdullah. After all, who would have thought that a never-before-seen human cultivator could beat Abdullah to the point of admitting defeat? Lu Yi's share of the Azura seals was 3,670,000, which meant that her overall profit would be double this number. After all, they had agreed to split it 50-50. Of course, Azura seals couldn't be directly traded, so Lu Yi could only obtain the rights to these Azura seals. "What does fellow Taoist want to buy? I'll go buy it for you right now." "Walnut, help me exchange for some treasures that can increase the quality of my magic source," Lu Yi said. Walnut understood. This kind of treasure was something that all cultivators above Yu Yao needed, so Lu Yi's request was normal. She nodded and said, "Then, fellow Taoist, please wait here for a moment." After saying this, the two of them disappeared. Lu Yi quietly waited on the side. Not long after, Walnut and her master reappeared. She handed a storage ring to Lu Yi. "I casually exchanged for some things. Fellow Taoist, please take a look." "No need." Lu Yi put away the storage ring. With the Azura contract, Walnut couldn't do anything unless she didn't want to live anymore. As Walnut spoke, she took out another item and handed it to Lu Yi. "This is a gift from my master." Lu Yi looked at it and saw that it was a large piece of green spirit moon essence. He had seen this thing in the treasury before and vaguely remembered that its price was 380,000 Azura seals. The piece in front of him was larger than the one he had seen before, so he roughly estimated that it was worth at least 500,000 Azura seals. Lu Yi hesitated for a moment before accepting it. "Then many thanks." Although there was a saying that one should not receive a reward for nothing, Nan Lian had always bet with her disciple on Lu Yi. The amount of Azura seals she earned was much more than her disciple, so what was the big deal about giving him a piece of green spirit moon essence? Lu Yi knew this, so he didn't refuse. After all, he had a huge need for this kind of treasure. Now that he had one more piece, he might be able to save a lot of trouble in the future. Nan Lian smiled gently. "No need. Thanks to you, I'm very rich now." She didn't hide anything and spoke the truth. "Does fellow Taoist have time?" Walnut asked from the side. "What's wrong?" Lu Yi looked at her. Walnut giggled. "If fellow Taoist has time, I'd like to invite you for a drink." It was rare to meet a character like Lu Yi. Her honored master had also told her to interact with him as much as possible. Perhaps one day she would need his help. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "I used up a lot of energy in the battle just now." Of course, he wasn't interested in drinking. Moreover, it was two women he wasn't familiar with. Wouldn't it be awkward if he didn't have anything to say? Walnut understood. "The next time, when fellow Taoist has time, just call me." Lu Yi didn't refuse. Walnut and her disciple bid farewell and left. But before they left, Nan Lian suddenly thought of something and turned to Lu Yi. "All right, if you have nothing to do, you can go to the bounty hall and take a look. Maybe you'll gain something. But if you really want to go, I advise you to change your appearance. Otherwise, you'll be hated by others." Bounty hall. Of course Lu Yi knew this place. This was the place where the cultivators of the Azura field issued all kinds of bounty missions. The reward for a mission was Azura seals, but cultivators couldn't set the price themselves. The Azura field determined the reward based on the difficulty of the mission. This was undoubtedly to prevent cultivators from transferring Azura seals through this method. After all, if a cultivator could set the price themselves, they could issue a very simple mission and set a very high reward for their own people to accept. Why did Nan Lian want him to go to the bounty hall? Moreover, she wanted him to change his appearance. However, Lu Yi could feel that she didn't have any ill intentions towards him. In fact, she was full of goodwill and appreciation because he helped her win a lot of Azura seals. After thinking about it, Lu Yi decided to take a look at the bounty hall. In any case, he had nothing to do at the moment. As for refining the treasures that could increase the quality of his source of magic power, he had the innate skill tree, so it wasn't difficult at all. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the bounty hall. Instead, he returned to his cave. Since Nan Lian wanted him to change his appearance, he would obediently do as she said. This was something he was very familiar with. End of chapter. Chapter 1914. With the support of the Thousand Faces spirit inscriptions, Lu Ye's appearance changed greatly. Even his body became shorter, turning him into a stocky man with a long beard. With the activation of the pseudo-spirit inscriptions, his magic power fluctuations were concealed to the level of a mid-stage Moonjade realm cultivator. He then put away the mountain plate saber, and a standard body cultivator was born. Only then did he take out the Azura token. With a thought, he arrived at the bounty hall. This was his first time here. When he looked up, he saw a huge dome hanging above his head. When he looked around, he couldn't see the end of the bounty hall. This was clearly a huge sealed space, and he didn't know where it was located in the heavenly Azura realm. There were many cultivators shuttling back and forth, and it was very lively. Under Lu Ye's observation, the entire bounty hall was divided into regions. Each region had a number arranged in order of A, B, C, and D. In these regions, there were small hidden rooms, and outside the rooms, there were also numbers. Many of these small rooms had cultivators going in and out. Gui had told Lu Yi about this before, so Lu Yi naturally knew that those small rooms were for cultivators to discuss the details of their missions. If there were missions to be issued, there would naturally be missions to be accepted. Everyone would agree on which small room to meet and discuss in detail. He looked around, found a corner, and stood there. Only then did he immerse himself in checking his Azura token. The Azura token had a very comprehensive function in the Azura realm. Cultivators couldn't do without this special token in all aspects. Inside the bounty hall, cultivators could use the Azura token to investigate all kinds of bounty missions. Lu Yi activated his magic power and immersed his mind. A translucent light screen appeared in his vision. The light screen seemed to be floating in front of him, and there was a list of information on it. This was undoubtedly a bounty mission. Lu Yi took a closer look and found that the first mission was related to the Azura field. Provide any concrete information about the Azura realm's location, and the reward is 80 million Azura seals. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. There was no doubt that this bounty had been issued by Rizhao. After all, 80 million Azura seals wasn't something that just anyone could take out. Only Rizhao had the capital to do so. Before he came, he knew that many experts were interested in the Azura realm. Since ancient times, countless people had been looking for this treasure, but they had never found any concrete clues. Everyone knew that the Azura realm was hidden in the Azura realm, but the key was that they couldn't find it. This was because as long as anyone entered the Azura field's range, they would directly appear in the heavenly Azura realm. After leaving the heavenly Azura realm, they would enter the training scene again. No one knew what the real Azura star field was like. This mission had probably been issued for a long time, but no one could swallow it even though 80 million Azura seals was a lot. Lu Yi looked further. The reward for killing Zhao Kong was 58,560,000 Azura seals. For killing Hu Yingying, the reward was 42 million Azura seals. The reward for killing Ma Bin was 56,900,000 Azura seals. Lu Yi looked further and saw that all the bounties above 10 million were required to kill a cultivator. He even saw a Bru and Gu Sheng's names among the bounties. The two of them had accumulated a bounty of almost 10 million. He wondered what they had done to make the world angry and resentful. How was this a bounty list? This was a hunting list. However, Lu Ye's gaze fell on the third name. Ma Bin. Was this Ma Bin the Ma Bin he knew? Or was it just the same name? The name Ma Bin wasn't rare, and there were many people in the human race. The one who could be in this position was undoubtedly Rizhao, and a very powerful one at that. Lu Yi faintly felt that this Ma Bin might be the previous 9 prefectures senior he had met once. Even so, he couldn't help much. The confrontation between Rizhao and Rizhao wasn't something he could get involved in now. It seemed that after Ma Bin killed Rizhao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he came to the Azura realm. Otherwise, why would there be a bounty for him here? He now had some understanding of the previous 9 prefectures. He didn't know why Ma Bin killed Rizhao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but now he had some insight. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Yi continued to look. After the 10 million bounties, there was a huge gap. After that, there was no need to kill a cultivator. It was just some ordinary bounty missions, so there wasn't any accumulated bounties. There were many types of missions. Some were to ask someone to refine medicine, some were to find someone to explore a training scene, and some were to find lost friends and family. Lu Yi was puzzled. Why did Nan Lian ask him to come to the bounty hall? These missions didn't seem to have anything to do with him. However, as he looked, he suddenly saw a mission and his eyes lit up. A strange poison that devours blood and vitality. The source of the poison is unknown. The poisoned person's blood and vitality will deteriorate. They can only use high-quality blood and vitality pills to prolong their life. The reward is 300,000 Azura seals. This mission was undoubtedly suitable for him. Under the powerful burning power of the talent tree, no matter what kind of strange poison it would be dealt with. 300,000 Azura seals was already a lot. He only got a little more than 100,000 from his previous training. If he took this mission, it would be equivalent to 2 training sessions. Coming here was the right choice. There was a pleasant surprise. However, after thinking about it, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. Nan Lian asked him to come here and specifically told him to change his appearance. She definitely didn't want him to take this mission. She couldn't have known that he had the talent tree and could cure poisons. Therefore, this was just an unexpected gain. Nan Lian must have another reason for telling him this. However, it had to be said that there were actually quite a few missions to help people detoxify. A strange poison that could render a cultivator helpless was obviously not that easy to deal with. Perhaps Rizhao had the ability to do so, but if he really had the ability, why would he care about the bounty? Lu Yi secretly remembered these missions and prepared to take them when he returned. After looking for a long time, Lu Yi finally understood why Nan Lian had asked him to come here. It was because there was a large row of missions on the bounty board that were almost exactly the same. The description of the mission was, during the Lunar Jade ranking battle, you were injured by someone with a blade. The injury is strange and difficult to heal. It is suspected that you are poisoned. The reward is 30,000 Azura seals. Lu Yi immediately knew what was going on. Wasn't he the one who had been injured by someone with a blade during the Lunar Jade ranking battle? Those who had been injured by him all had the power of Fong lingering around their wounds. It was normal for them to mistakenly think that they were poisoned. The power of Fong was too strange. If Lu Yi wasn't the owner of the Fong blade, he probably wouldn't have thought that there was such a disgusting power in this world. In fact, the power of Fong was not unsolvable. If one's cultivation was high enough, they could forcibly suppress and remove it. For example, Tian Yen had asked Rizhao from his clan for help. However, it was very difficult for Rizhao to do so. It required time and energy. And the simplest way was to ignore it. The power of Fong lasted for a certain period of time. Lu Yi didn't know how long it lasted, but he was sure that it wouldn't be too long. When the time was up, it would naturally disappear. But who dared to ignore it? Anyone with such injuries and constant bleeding would be terrified. Naturally, it was better to deal with it as soon as possible and feel at ease. Nan Lian must have inadvertently seen or heard about these missions. That was why she told Lu Yi to come to the bounty hall. She felt that since these people's injuries were caused by Lu Ye's poison, there must be a corresponding way to detoxify it. As for changing their appearance, that was for sure. Who would poison someone and specially accept a bounty mission to detoxify someone? If they really did that, they would be inviting jealousy and hatred. But a bounty of 30,000 Azura seals, who were they looking down on? Lu Yi was indignant, but he also knew that the amount of the bounty was not determined by the will of the cultivator. This was the amount set by the Azura arena. So what if it was 30,000? Fortunately, there were many missions. Lu Yi made a rough calculation. He had fought in more than 200 battles, which meant that more than 200 cultivators had been injured by him. There were only a little more than 100 missions here. Obviously, not everyone had come here to post missions. But it didn't matter. As long as the news of him completing this mission spread, there should be more missions. 30,000 for one mission was not much, but what about 100 or 200? This was the rhythm of becoming rich. Lu Ye's mind became active. He hadn't even been in the Azura arena for a month, but he had already received 3 to 4 million Azura seals from Walnut. He could also earn a few million Azura seals from his side. If he could do this repeatedly, wouldn't he become rich quickly? Maybe he could even save up enough Azura seals to exchange for the Azura arena's treasures. But he also knew that this was just a thought. Because even if he left the Azura arena, he would not start from the beginning the next time he came in. The Azura arena would record his ranking on the Yu Yao ranking and his previous performances. The next time he came in, they would arrange a suitable ranking for him. Therefore, he could only start from the beginning once, unless he advanced to the Sunshine Realm. With a thought, Lu Yi accepted a bounty mission through the Azura token. Soon, the Azura token vibrated. Lu Yi checked it and found that it was a cultivator he had never contacted or interacted with. This was undoubtedly the Azura arena's rules. After accepting a mission, Lu Yi could communicate with the cultivator who issued the mission for a short period of time. There was no need to exchange imprints. The other party was undoubtedly anxious because his injuries had not healed. In this state, he could not participate in the training. He did not even know if he would die from blood loss one day. Lu Yi looked left and right and gave the other party a number. Then, he put away the Azura token and walked over. There was a small, secluded room with the door wide open. It was no doubt empty and could be used for a while. End of chapter. Chapter 1915. In a small room in the bounty hall, Lu Yi, who had changed his appearance, sat upright and waited quietly. In the corner of the room, there was another figure. It was his precious blood clone. At this moment, the clone's position was concealed by a formation. Even if someone came in, they wouldn't be able to notice the abnormality if their eyesight wasn't good enough. The mountain coiling blade was placed across the clone's knee. The power of brightness was very simple to deal with. He only needed to use the mountain coiling blade, which was transformed from the Fong blade. However, since Lu Yi had changed his appearance, he naturally couldn't show his true body, so he came up with this method. After waiting for a moment, a figure hurriedly rushed in, wrapped in the smell of blood. "Greetings, fellow Taoist." The person cupped his fists and bowed. Lu Yi looked up and found that the newcomer was indeed familiar. It should be an opponent that he had injured in a battle. As for his name, he really didn't know. There had been too many cultivators challenging him recently. Apart from a few who were strong enough, how could he remember the names of others? "Sit." Lu Yi gestured with his hand. The cultivator immediately sat in front of Lu Yi and said, "Fellow Taoist, my injuries were caused by the new Moon Jade Roll champion. It seems like I was poisoned, but it doesn't seem like it." He obviously wanted to explain his injuries in detail to Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his hand and stopped him. "I understand the situation. Give me your hand." The cultivator quickly stretched out his hand. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. Then he urged his magic power and instructed, "Relax your mind. Don't resist." The other party didn't suspect anything. No one dared to act recklessly in this place, so he wasn't worried that Lu Yi would harm him. He immediately relaxed his mind and allowed Lu Ye's magic power to enter his body. After a moment, he felt Lu Ye's magic power circulating in his body, but his injuries showed no signs of improvement. He couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist, can you do it?" Logically speaking, since the other party had accepted the mission, they must be confident in completing it. If they failed to complete the mission after accepting it, there would be a corresponding punishment. The amount of Azura seals the bounty was worth would be deducted from the other party. The injuries on his body were extremely strange, and he could not suppress them with his cultivation. He even tried to cut off his injured flesh, but it was to no avail. Even if he cut off his injured flesh, there was still that strange power lingering on the new wounds. Lu Yi looked up at him, then gently tapped his wrist with her finger. As soon as he finished speaking, the cultivator's body shook, because he clearly felt that the strange power in his wound had completely dissipated at this moment, and his entire body suddenly became much more relaxed. His eyes couldn't help but widen greatly, and he moved his muscles and bones to check his injuries. When he discovered that his injuries had already begun to heal, he was instantly overjoyed and praised, "Fellow Taoist is really amazing." He didn't understand how Lu Yi did it, but it was a fact that his problem had been solved. Those 30,000 Azura seals were well spent. Even his attitude towards Lu Yi changed. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist. May I ask for your name?" A person with such strange abilities was undoubtedly worth making friends with. Who knew if he would encounter similar troubles in the future? If he could establish a relationship with him, he wouldn't have to be afraid of anything in the future. Lu Yi waved his hand in an unfathomable manner and didn't say anything. When the cultivator saw this, he knew what Lu Yi meant. Although it was a pity, he still thanked him and took his leave. After he left, Lu Yi began to check his Azura command, and found that there were indeed 30,000 Azura seals in it. This money was really easy to earn. He immediately accepted another bounty and waited quietly. Time passed, and one after another, the cultivators who had fought with him in the battle arena came in and out. Lu Yi first dealt with one bounty before accepting another. But after a while, he found that this was too inefficient, so he simply accepted all the bounty missions at once. Then he sent a message to the cultivators who issued the bounties, telling them to come to the small room here. As a result, an extremely strange phenomenon appeared in the bounty hall. Outside a small room, many cultivators lined up and slowly walked forward. Some of the cultivators who didn't know what was going on went to inquire and soon understood the whole story. There were more than 100 bounty missions, and it took Lu Yi almost a day to deal with them. It wouldn't take too long to solve the problem, but he had to put on an act to make others feel that the 30,000 Azura seals were worth it. After dealing with the first batch of bounties, Lu Yi looked at the bounty board again and found that there were a few more similar bounties. Obviously, these people found out that someone could cure the strange saber wound, so they all used their Azura seals to issue missions. Lu Yi didn't refuse any of them and accepted them all. After dealing with this batch, there were a few more bounties on the bounty board. Lu Yi busied himself non-stop, and the number of Azura seals increased at an impressive rate. His mood gradually became better. Finally, when the number of Azura seals exceeded 6 million, there were no more similar missions on the bounty board. The number was a bit off, but it was more or less the same. After all, not everyone needed him to cure the power of brightness. Some people didn't know about this, so they naturally didn't issue any missions, and some people could ask their elders for help. Just as Lu Yi was about to accept the mission to cure the poison, the light at the door suddenly dimmed, and then someone stepped in. It wasn't one person, but two people. One of them was extremely tall and burly, and he walked in front, blocking the figure of the second person. Lu Yi looked up and blinked his eyes. The two people who had come were none other than Abro and Gu Sheng. When he didn't see them before, Lu Yi thought that the two of them had asked their elders for help to solve the power of brightness. Whether it was the barbarian race or the yellow dragon realm, there must be a Rizhao resident in the Azura field. Who would have thought that they didn't, and they didn't issue any bounty missions, but directly came to find him. After entering the small room, Abro looked at Lu Yi condescendingly with a look of amazement. Gu Sheng also flashed out from behind him, but he didn't look at Lu Yi. Instead, he looked in the direction of the precious blood avatar. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. This Gu Sheng's perception was very strong. He had already concealed the precious blood avatar with an array, so basically no one who came in before found it. However, Gu Sheng saw it immediately, which showed how strong his perception was. Huh! Abro suddenly made a sound of surprise, and looked at Lu Yi more carefully, as if he wanted to see through his disguise. Hearing his voice, Gu Sheng finally turned his head with a serious expression. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know what these two guys wanted to do. After a long while, Abro tilted his head slightly and whispered to Gu Sheng, "Are you mistaken?" "There can't be a mistake," Gu Sheng whispered back. "If you're not mistaken, then this is too flawless. Did you see anything?" "I didn't see anything." Abro reprimanded mercilessly. "You saw it?" "I didn't either." Lu Yi frowned and said, "Fellow Taoists, what's the matter?" Did these two really think that he couldn't hear them whispering like this? Abro grinned and sat directly in front of Lu Yi. He put his hands on his knees and looked at him with a burning gaze. "Hello, fellow Taoist. We meet again." Lu Yi's expression didn't change. "What do you mean?" Abro chuckled. "Fellow Taoist, you know what I mean. Why do you have to pretend?" Lu Yi frowned and stared at Abro. He didn't know if the other party had really seen through him. It didn't make sense. His disguise with the help of spirit tattoos couldn't be seen through so easily, but Abro directly called him fellow Taoist Lu. This obviously meant that he knew something. Gu Sheng also sat down and looked at Lu Yi. "Although the soldier tribe is rare, it's not unknown. I once saw a description of the strange power of the soldier tribe in an ancient book of this world. It's almost exactly the same as the injuries on your body. It's also recorded that the strange power of the soldier tribe can only be forcibly suppressed by a powerful force. When the time comes, the power of the soldier tribe will disappear, or rely on the soldier tribe themselves to deal with it easily." Lu Yi suddenly understood. So this was the problem. Gu Sheng was born in the Yellow Dragon realm, a top realm like the Yellow Dragon realm. Naturally, there were many records of all kinds of secrets. It wasn't surprising that he had seen some records of the soldier tribe. If that was all, it would be fine. The key point was that Lu Yi had been helping those injured cultivators solve their problems for the past 2 days. Gu Sheng naturally made the connection. As for his current disguise, in this vast cultivation world, there were many ways to disguise oneself. If Gu Xing had already identified him, then even the most perfect disguise would be meaningless. However, I don't know what you two fellow Taoists are talking about. Lu Yi couldn't admit his identity. He didn't know what kind of temperament these two had. Moreover, he had just beaten them up in the arena. Who knew if they would hold a grudge against him? If they were to leak out what had happened here, they would be hated by others. Abro said, "Fellow Taoist, we have no ill intentions towards you. We just want to..." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Gu Sheng. "Then we've made a mistake," he continued. "I heard that fellow Taoist can heal our injuries." "Yes." Lu Yi nodded. "Please post the bounties first." Abro and Gu Sheng did what they wanted. After a short while, Lu Yi saw that there were 2 more bounties of 30,000 Azura seals on the bounty list. He accepted the bounties and helped them solve their problems. Gu Xing immediately relaxed. His body was heavily injured and affected by the power of Fong. The pressure he endured was much more severe than Abro's. "Fellow Taoist, can you exchange your Azura token imprint?" Gu Xing asked. "If so, if there are similar injuries in the future, we can directly contact fellow Taoist." Many people had made this request before, but Lu Yi had never agreed to it. However, after thinking about it, he took out his Azura token. End of chapter. Chapter 1916. Lu Yi was willing to exchange Shura tokens with Abro and Gu Xing not because of their strength, but because he had a vague feeling that they were looking for him for something. However, since he had denied his identity, they could not bring it up. Lu Yi did not know why they were looking for him, but there was no harm in listening. Besides, Lu Yi had his own plans. Based on his previous fight with Abro, this guy had condensed the flower of the body. Coupled with the unique environment of the ancient barbarian world, it was very likely that he knew the secret of the 3 flowers. In order to condense the flower of qi, one needed to have a perfect source. This was only Lu Ye's own speculation. However, if he could get some concrete information from Abro, it would undoubtedly be of great help to him. Even if Abro did not come looking for him this time, he was prepared to find an opportunity to interact with Abro. Therefore, Gu Sheng's suggestion of exchanging tokens was exactly what he wanted. Of course, he would not refuse. After Abro and Gu Sheng left, Lu Yi pondered for a moment before accepting the bounty mission to cure the poison. After waiting for a while, a sallow and emaciated person with a weak vitality walked in. Lu Yi could tell at a glance that this person's condition was not good because the vitality in his body was too weak. Lu Yi did not know what his original cultivation was, but even if he still had some cultivation left, he would not be able to display much strength with his current vitality. According to the bounty mission, this person was afflicted with a strange poison that could devour vitality. The source was unknown, and so far, no one had been able to cure it. In this huge Shura field, there must be a lot of medical cultivators. Since this person could afford to pay 300,000 Shura seals, he must have consulted many medical cultivators. However, he still looked like neither a human nor a ghost. It was obvious that the medical cultivators he had consulted were helpless. The person sat down and coughed a few times like an ordinary person who was terminally ill. His dim eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at Lu Yi. His bounty mission had been on the bounty list for several years, but no one had accepted it. He had already resigned himself to his fate, but who knew that he would be pleasantly surprised? Since the person who accepted the mission had the confidence to accept it, he must be confident in his own abilities. However, after sizing him up, the person's expression became strange. He had thought that the person who accepted the mission was a medical cultivator, but now, no matter how he looked at it, the stocky man sitting opposite him did not seem like a medical cultivator. "Fellow Taoist," he panted. "I've been afflicted with this strange poison for many years. It's constantly devouring my vitality. Stretch out your hand," Lu Yi instructed. The man immediately stretched out his hand. While Lu Yi examined it, he continued to describe his situation so that Lu Yi could make a more direct judgment. Lu Yi didn't listen at all. If he was a real medical cultivator, this information would undoubtedly be very important, But he wasn't. After checking for a while, he said, "It might be a little painful. Please bear with it." The man nodded. "I can endure it." After being tormented by the strange poison for so many years, what kind of suffering had he not endured? His heart was already as firm as a rock. Lu Yi immediately activated the power of her talent tree. Invisible roots extended from her palm and probed into the body of the cultivator in front of her. Then, they gently burned away the strange poison in his body. In the past, he was able to burn down the power of the curse passed down in the bloodline of the mermaid clan with the help of the talent tree. What was this Su Qi poison to him now? However, this person's physical condition was really too poor, so Lu Yi had to be careful. Otherwise, this person might suddenly die. This cultivator's heart was indeed tough enough. The process of burning the talent tree was accompanied by great pain, but he didn't make a sound. He just clenched his teeth tightly and sweat poured out all over his body. As time passed, his eyes gradually became brighter. This was because he could feel that the strange poison that had troubled him for so many years was really slowly disappearing. It was as if there was a flowing flame in his body. Wherever the flame burned, there would be new life. Burning away such a strange poison was much easier than helping the mermaid clan to burn away the curse in their bloodline. Even so, Lu Yi still took half a day to complete the task. After he withdrew his hand, the cultivator closed his eyes and focused, carefully sensing the situation in his body. He was still very weak because he had been troubled by the strange poison for so many years. However, his qi and blood were no longer disappearing. Under the urging of his magic power, it flowed smoothly without any signs of blockage. This undoubtedly meant that as long as he could get enough rest, he would be able to recover sooner or later. Opening his eyes, he was overjoyed and bowed to Lu Yi. "Thank you, fellow Taoist, for saving me from this disaster. I will remember this kindness forever." Lu Yi waved his hand. "I took your money and helped you solve your problem." This person also wanted to exchange Azura tokens with Lu Yi, looking as if he wanted to make friends with him. Naturally, Lu Yi declined. He could only regretfully leave and prepare to recuperate. After this person left, Lu Yi checked the bounty list and received a similar mission. Another day later, Lu Yi left the bounty hall. There were no more missions suitable for him on the bounty list, so there was no point in staying any longer. Returning to his cultivation dwelling, Lu Yi checked his Azura tokens and found that the number of Azura tokens he had accumulated had exceeded 7 million. He was in a good mood and decided to visit the bounty hall more often in the future. Who knows, he might be able to find a suitable and simple mission. 7 million Azura seals. According to the price of treasures in the Azura field, even the white moon crystals he had refined before could be exchanged for 6 of them. However, Lu Yi didn't immediately exchange for them. Instead, he took out a storage ring and took out the items inside. These were all treasures that could increase the quality of his source that Walnut had given him. Adding the blue moon spirit jade that Nan Lian had given him, he had a total value of 4 million Azura seals. If converted to spirit jades, it wouldn't be worth much. 40 million spirit jades wasn't a large number to Lu Yi, but these were all good things that couldn't be bought with spirit jades. In the Azura field, there were many treasures. As long as one had enough Azura seals, they could be exchanged for anything. Lu Yi increasingly felt that his decision to come to the Azura field was the right one. Otherwise, if he just waited in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, how could there be such a good thing? He immediately refined the treasures in front of him one by one. Activating the power of the talent tree, refining these treasures was simple and easy. He only needed to consume some fuel reserves. Half a day later, Lu Yi felt a clear change in his source. He immediately took out a piece of spirit jade. This time, he didn't activate the power of the talent tree, but refined it himself. This was the normal cultivation method of all cultivators. He could feel strands of energy overflowing from the spirit jade and seeping into his body. Under the circulation of his source, the spirit energy was converted into magic power and stored in his body. Unfortunately, he rarely used this kind of normal cultivation method in the past. He didn't have an accurate comparison, so he didn't know how much the quality of his source had improved. If he wanted an accurate comparison, he would have to return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Only by going deep into the sea would he be able to make a clear judgment. However, one thing was certain. Although the quality of his source had improved, it was far from the limit. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Looking at the 7 million Azura seals in the Azura command, Lu Yi pondered for a moment and decided to keep them for now. In any case, refining those treasures was very easy. He could exchange for them whenever he needed them. Keeping the Azura seals could be used in case he needed them. This time, he could easily earn Azura seals. In the future, it wouldn't be so easy. He would have to slowly accumulate experience after experience. Walking out of the cave, Lu Yi flew up. Several days had passed since his last experience. Now that the dust had settled on the Yu Yao rankings, Lu Yi naturally had to enter the next experience. In the Azura field, experience wasn't just for tempering oneself. It also allowed one to earn Azura seals and exchange them for resources. This was also the reason why many cultivators were unwilling to leave for many years. Even a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where many galaxies gathered, wasn't as attractive as the Azura field. Lu Ye's expression was calm as he gradually ascended. The last experience hadn't been too difficult, but he didn't know how it would be this time. Logically speaking, every experience that a cultivator went through had a risk of dying. Even someone as strong as Gu Sheng had been seriously injured in the last experience. However, Lu Yi felt that there shouldn't be anything that could threaten him in the Yu Yao realm. Thus, he didn't know what kind of experience the Azura field would arrange for him. This kind of thing couldn't be predicted in advance. He could only be vigilant. When he reached a certain height, the same experience as last time appeared again. The scenery around him suddenly changed, and he was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, a beam of light appeared in the darkness, faintly revealing a blurry image. Lu Yi focused his attention on the scene in front of him. With his previous experience, he naturally knew that everything he saw and heard now would become the background of the next experience, so he naturally didn't act carelessly. As he waited, the blurry image suddenly twisted and changed. Lu Yi frowned, not knowing what was going on. Just as he was puzzled, a faint sound rang in his ears. However, this sound seemed to be affected by some kind of power, becoming indistinct and intermittent. The blurry image before him distorted even more frequently. Lu Ye's eyes widened, but he still couldn't see what it was. Lu Yi was at a loss. For a moment, an absurd thought appeared in his mind. Was there a problem with the Azura field? He couldn't be blamed for thinking this. The scene before him was just too strange. He couldn't see the image and he couldn't hear the sound. This didn't make sense. Suddenly, his body fell into darkness once more, and even the intermittent and obscure sounds by his ears disappeared. Lu Yi was completely enveloped in darkness, as if he had been thrown into a bottomless black hole. This kind of environment inexplicably made him feel anxious and oppressed. "Is anyone there?" he shouted. However, he couldn't hear his own voice. He tried to move, but his legs couldn't move. This was bad. This Azura field? Perhaps there really was a problem. Otherwise, this situation wouldn't have happened. End of chapter. Chapter 1917. Although Lu Yi hadn't been in the Azura field for long and had only experienced one trial before, he could still keenly sense that something was wrong with the current situation. What he was experiencing now was completely different from the first time he entered the trial scene. Lu Ye's first thought was that there was something wrong with the Azura field, but then he thought about it. The Azura field was a starry sky treasure and had been maintained for tens of thousands of years before he came here. How could it be so easy for something to go wrong? Moreover, the timing was so coincidental. But if that wasn't the case, then how could the current situation be explained? As his thoughts changed, the thick darkness suddenly faded and Lu Yi suddenly found that he could feel his own existence. There was a faint light in front of him from a crack. He blinked and raised his hand to push forward. With a soft creak, light shone in front of him. He took a few steps forward and in an instant, the fragrance of birds and flowers rushed to his face. He turned his head to look around and found that this should be some kind of deep mountain forest. There were thick trees all around him with fluffy canopies like open umbrellas. Not far in front of him was a sparkling lake, and the fragrance of grass mixed with the soil lingered at the tip of his nose. He turned his head to look behind him and found that he had walked out of a straw hut. The small straw hut in the middle of the mountain had a sense of being hidden in the wilderness. It seemed that he had unknowingly entered the trial scene, but why didn't he get any information about this scene? Thinking back to his strange experience just now, Lu Yi felt that something was not right. After a moment of thought, he raised his hand and took out the Azura command. He immersed his mind into it, but there was no feedback. What did this mean? Why did the Azura arena throw him into such an obscure place? Then what was the mission of his training this time? Rumble. Just as Lu Yi was pondering, a soft sound suddenly came from his feet. He looked down and saw something the size of a baby's fist rolling on the ground. This thing looked extremely familiar. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that this was bad, he quickly raised his foot and stepped on it. He frowned and his whole body froze in place. His expression was tangled, and he looked like he had a deep grudge. After a long while, he sighed. He knew that if it was a blessing, it wouldn't be a disaster. If it was a disaster, it couldn't be avoided. Only then did he slowly move his foot away and look down with narrowed eyes. A large, unlucky character instantly appeared in his vision. How could it be the word unlucky? Lu Yi moved quickly, using the sole of his foot to cover up the character, but it was useless. The character turned into a dark beam of light that pierced through the sole of his foot and into his forehead. Lu Yi's heart sank, and he immediately had a bad feeling, as if his whole body was covered by a layer of invisible weight. He removed his foot, bent down, picked up the object on the ground, and threw it into the lake in front of him. It was a bad start. Without any information or clues, he had no idea what he was supposed to do during this training. That was one thing, but the dice of fate had even added bad luck to him. He clearly remembered that he had tied up the dice of fate and hung it at his waist. Moreover, the rope he had used was extremely tough, so it was impossible for it to break for no reason. But now it had broken. Could it be that he was really unlucky this time? In the treasure vault, he had personally witnessed a late-stage moon jade being killed by the power of the Azura Field's rules. Thus, Lu Yi knew that the dice of fate was an extremely mysterious thing. He didn't plan on casually using it again, especially in such a situation. But now it had fallen down on its own. But thinking about it, was it better to be unlucky than to be unlucky? If the dice of fate really did turn out to be unlucky this time, Lu Yi didn't know what kind of danger he would encounter. He immersed his mind and inspected his talent tree. Sure enough, a gray fog rose up from the talent tree, burning away the power of the dice of fate. But with his previous experience, Lu Yi knew that this process would continue for several days. He secretly decided that he wouldn't go anywhere for the next few days. He would live here in seclusion to avoid any mishaps. Moreover, looking at the environment in which he had appeared, it seemed that he really was a secluded expert. Looking at the lake in front of him, Lu Yi sighed and jumped in. He had thrown away the dice of fate in a moment of anger. This thing was a supreme treasure, so how could he throw it away so casually? Diving deep into the water, he easily found the dice of fate and stuffed it into his clothes. But as soon as he emerged from the water, Lu Yi frowned. This was because two figures had appeared in front of his grass hut at some unknown time. One was tall and the other was short. The tall one was like a bamboo pole, and the short one was like a round ball. Their appearances were indescribable. They didn't look like anything good. As expected, he was really unlucky. Even if he decided to live here in seclusion for a few days, he still wouldn't be able to find peace. At this time, these two uninvited guests were coldly sizing up Lu Yi. The tall one asked, "Boy, do you see an old guy with a child?" "No," Lu Yi decisively replied. The tall one seriously sized him up, as if trying to see if he was lying. But Lu Yi really didn't see any old guy with a child. His expression was honest and sincere. "Kill him." After saying this, the tall one took the lead and flew forward. He spread out his powerful divine sense, clearly searching for something. The short cultivator rushed toward Lu Yi. Magic powers surged from his body. He was actually a moon jade intermediate stage cultivator. Lu Yi was helpless. He had already decided to live in seclusion for a few days and wait for the talent tree to resolve his bad luck. What did they have to force him? This bad luck? Was it his bad luck, or was it the bad luck of these two uninvited guests? He really couldn't say for sure. With a clang, a long saber was unsheathed. The tall cultivator, who had already flown a distance away, suddenly turned his head back. His eyes suddenly narrowed. He actually saw the scene of his companion's head flying high into the air, while the young man who had just appeared from the lake was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a sense of danger rose in his heart. The tall cultivator immediately looked to the side and saw a bright saber light. With a splashing sound, Lu Yi passed by him. Blood spurted out from his body, and his bamboo-like body was cut in half, falling into the lake. In the next instant, the lake's surface was dyed red. Standing above the lake, Lu Yi swung the mountain plate saber and sheathed it. At that moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction. There was a sound coming from that direction. It seemed to be the crying of an infant. He immediately rushed in that direction. In the blink of an eye, he arrived behind a large tree. Sure enough, he saw an infant in swaddling clothes. At that moment, the infant was being held in the arms of an old man. Blood flowed from the old man's body, and a huge wound on his chest and abdomen could be seen. His 5 internal organs had already been pulverized. His eyes were dim. If he wasn't strong enough, he would have already died from such injuries. Lu Yi immediately thought of the tall cultivator's question. He understood that those two people hadn't found this place by chance. They had most likely chased after the old man and the infant. Not only were the old man's injuries serious, but he also seemed to have been poisoned. This was because his face was black. Lu Yi couldn't help but think of the two cultivators from before. When they activated their magic power, they seemed to be surrounded by this aura. Needless to say, the old man was injured by those two Yuyao. Lu Ye's sudden appearance caused the old man's dim eyes to tremble. However, when he saw that Lu Yi wasn't one of the two cultivators chasing after him, his eyes became much brighter. He shakily lifted the crying infant and said with difficulty, "Fellow Taoist, go to the cloud radish, sacred ground." Lu Yi looked at him and a thought flashed through his mind. This experience was different from the last time. He didn't obtain any useful information. However, at this moment, he encountered a dying man who had entrusted his child to him. Thinking about it, was sending this infant to the so-called cloud radish sacred ground his current mission? If it was under normal circumstances, Lu Yi wouldn't hesitate. However, with his current bad luck, Lu Yi didn't know whether he should agree or not. Without any time to think, the old man spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of his internal organs. Then, his head tilted to the side and he died on the spot. The infant in his arms fell straight to the ground. He was already crying loudly, but now he cried even more fiercely. Just as the infant was about to hit the ground, Lu Yi caught him with a single hand. When he looked at the old man again, he had already turned into specks of light and disappeared. This made Lu Yi understand that this old man was undoubtedly a shadow. The two Yuyao he killed just now didn't seem to be shadows. He also didn't know where they came from. Holding the infant in his arms, Lu Ye's face was filled with worry. This experience in the Azura battlefield was really strange. Someone like him, who killed people like Scything Flax, actually had to escort an infant to the so-called Cloud Radish sacred ground. In comparison, Lu Yi felt that killing people was much more enjoyable. Sure enough, this trip didn't go well. Bad luck was everywhere. However, since this was a training mission, there was no reason to refuse. After all, it was related to obtaining the Azura seal. His plan to live in seclusion was ruined. The infant's crying wasn't loud. Instead, he seemed to be weak. Lu Yi released his divine sense and quickly discovered that this was because the infant was too weak. Looking at the infant's appearance, he seemed to be less than a month old. What kind of background did he have to attract the pursuit of Tu Yuyao? Then, the first thing he needed to do was find something to eat for this child. Thinking of this, Lu Yi leapt up. He didn't know where the cloud radish sacred ground was, so he could only choose a random direction. Half a day later, in a small village at the foot of a mountain, Lu Yi stood at the door of a house. Next to him was a rough man squatting on the ground. From time to time, the man would glance at Lu Yi, his eyes filled with fear. Inside the house, a woman held an infant in her arms and gently patted him. Her eyes were filled with kindness, and the sound of sucking and swallowing came from the infant's mouth. Lu Yi felt that he wasn't too unlucky. It didn't take him much effort to find a woman who was breastfeeding. He handed the infant to her and asked for her help. The woman readily agreed. End of chapter. Chapter 1918. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk there was the sound of muffled thunder, and lightning streaked across the sky like a twisting snake. The clouds were thick and heavy, giving off an extremely oppressive feeling. Lu Yi looked up at the sky, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I wonder when this damned weather will end," the rough man muttered. The rough man squatting by the side muttered and spat to the side, as if venting the dissatisfaction in his heart. "How long has this weather been going on?" Lu Yi asked. "It's been 2 months," the rough man replied cautiously. Although he was an ordinary person, he still knew about cultivation. Lu Yi had an extraordinary bearing, and he could tell at a glance that he was a successful cultivator. Naturally, the rough man looked up to him in awe. Lu Yi didn't say anything. In the rough man's opinion, this weather was nothing special. It was just a little bad. He only cared about whether the crops in his field could grow and whether he could get next year's rations during the autumn harvest. However, what Lu Yi saw was naturally different. He could clearly feel the aftermath of a fierce battle in the sky. The abnormal weather was partly caused by nature, but more importantly, it was caused by this battle. This realm was being invaded. Lu Yi immediately came to a conclusion. Lu Yi wasn't too sure about the background of this realm, but based on the fact that he had met Yu Yao before, this realm was undoubtedly a large one. He just didn't know if there was sunshine. If there was no sunshine, he naturally wouldn't have too many misgivings, but if there was sunshine, then it was a different story. Thinking about the word bad luck on the dice of fate, Lu Yi guessed that there was a high possibility that there was sunshine in this realm. So, he had to be careful. He didn't know what kind of force was invading this realm. Since the battle had lasted for 2 months, it meant that this realm still had the strength to resist. From the looks of it, the Cloud Vine Sacred Land was a very important place. He hadn't received any information about this trial, so he could only rely on his own inquiries and guesses. Just as he was thinking this, Lu Yi suddenly frowned and turned to look in a certain direction. Then, he flicked his finger, and a drop of treasured blood flew out. Under the stunned gaze of the rough man, it turned into a human figure identical to Lu Yi. However, the clothes on his body were blood red, as if they were cast in blood. Leaving the treasured blood clone to guard this place, Lu Yi's main body quickly left. He sensed 2 powerful auras approaching. What made him feel strange was that these 2 auras were vaguely familiar, as if he had sensed them somewhere before. Several dozen breaths later, several hundred li away, Lu Yi stood still and looked at the 2 figures, one tall and one short, with a look of surprise in his eyes. These 2 fellows were the 2 people he had killed in front of the thatched cottage. The shorter one had been decapitated by his saber, while the taller one had been sliced in half at the waist. With such injuries, not only would Yu Yao die, even Ri Zhao wouldn't be able to survive. Yet, not only had they not died, but they had also caught up to him. What was going on? Sensing the aura of these 2 people, they were indeed the 2 people he had met and not someone else. At this moment, both of them glared gloomily at Lu Yi, their expressions filled with anger. Moreover, the 2 of them had used some kind of secret technique to link their auras together, clearly preparing to join forces against the enemy. "Fellow Taoist, you're really something," the tall one said. "We were careless just now," said the short one. "Now let's fight again," the tall one said again. "If you don't want to die, that's fine too," the short one said for the second time. "Hand over that infant, then fellow Taoist, you'll come under my great heavenly God. Only then will you be safe." These 2 people spoke one after another, and the connection between them was extremely natural. It was as if one person was speaking, and this made Lu Yi feel extremely strange. He frowned slightly. Great Heavenly God, what is that? He vaguely guessed that the so-called Great Heavenly God should be the background of these two Yu Yao, but Lu Yi wasn't clear about the specifics. Perhaps it was a very powerful cultivator? Impudent! The tall one shouted harshly. The Great Heavenly God is supreme, above all the races in the world. Don't be rude. So, what exactly is the Great Heavenly God? Normally, Lu Yi couldn't be bothered to speak too much nonsense with the enemy, but right now he had too little information, so he naturally wanted to find out more information. Also, I clearly killed both of you, so why aren't you dead? He asked the question in his heart. When a cultivator reached the constellation tier, the cultivation direction was the cultivation of essence. Thus, after reaching the constellation tier, a cultivator's qi and blood would have a qualitative improvement, and it wouldn't be impossible for them to recover from their injuries, regrow their severed limbs, and so on. However, Lu Yi had really never seen anyone still alive after being decapitated. This was too illogical. What puzzled him even more was that he actually didn't sense the existence of the power of Fong from these two people. In other words, they had used some kind of method to dissolve the power of Fong around their wounds. Were these two people really the two people that he had killed? There's no need to speak too much with him. This kind of ignorant person will never be able to experience the glory of the Great Heavenly God. Kill him. The tall one shouted harshly. The two of them activated their qi, blood and magic power at the same time, and their aura instantly became comparable to that of Yu Yao's late stage. In the next instant, the two of them transformed into flowing lights, crisscrossing left and right, and like a pair of scissors, they cut toward Lu Ye's body. Lu Ye's expression was grave, and he unsheathed his pan-mountain saber. His figure moved slightly, and two saber lights slashed out at almost the same time. There was a poochie sound, and two bloody figures fell to the ground behind Lu Yi. Lu Yi frowned, and he tilted his head to look. These two people were so aggressive, and their words were full of arrogance. Lu Yi had thought that they were very powerful. But, this was it? The confidence that the so-called Great Heavenly God gave them was a bit too inflated. This time, Lu Yi used a heavy hand, and the two of them were directly cut into 4 halves. They couldn't be more dead. Lu Yi withdrew his pan-mountain saber, and his divine sense confirmed that they were already dead. The power of Fong around their wounds had also dissipated. The existence of the power of Fong was dependent on vitality. Strictly speaking, it was devouring a cultivator's vitality to maintain itself. Therefore, if there was no vitality, then the power of Fong couldn't exist alone. Lu Yi took a step forward and prepared to leave. However, his expression suddenly changed, and he looked toward the two corpses. In the next instant, a look of shock appeared on his face. He saw that the wounds of the two corpses were actually blooming with a faint light, and under the guidance of that light, the broken pieces of the two cultivators' bodies actually closed up. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying wounds healed, and then an astonishing vitality bloomed from their bodies. Lu Yi was dumbfounded. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have dared to believe that there was such a ridiculous thing in this world. Coming back from the dead was a word that could only be heard in legends, but now it was actually happening right under his nose. These two, what were they? Lu Yi was sure that they were definitely flesh and blood. The feeling of the Pan-Mountain saber's slash couldn't be wrong, but since they were flesh and blood, how could they not die? Looking at it this way, they had also come back from the dead before. The moment they came back to life, the two cultivators rushed toward Lu Yi again. However, after suffering a loss just now, they probably knew that their strength was inferior to Lu Yi's, so their gazes became extremely resolute. Lu Yi frowned. What he saw in front of him had already surpassed his understanding, but he still had no intention of dodging the attacks of the two cultivators. He didn't know what method these two had used to come back from the dead, but there couldn't be such a ridiculous thing in this world. If they couldn't be killed once and they couldn't be killed twice, then what about 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times? He wanted to see if these two were truly immortal and indestructible. The Pan-Mountain saber slashed out so quickly that the two cultivators had no time to react. However, Just as they were about to die, surging magic power suddenly surged out without restraint. Then with two loud booms, they exploded into a bloody mist. Blood splattered everywhere, and a black mist so dense that it was almost tangible wrapped around Lu Ye's body. This was the extreme concentration of magic power from the two cultivators. Lu Yi immediately sensed that something was wrong because his innate skill tree was reacting even more strongly. The innate skill tree was already burning away the power of misfortune from the die of fate, so now it was clearly burdened. These two cultivators' magic power was poisonous. He immediately recalled the injuries of the old man who had entrusted his child to him. The old man had shown signs of being poisoned, so it must have come from these two cultivators. Suddenly, Lu Yi understood where these two cultivators' confidence came from. They were indeed no match for him, but this kind of dirty trick was impossible to guard against. Once they fell for it, they could use their immortal bodies to slowly grind their opponents to death. If it were any other cultivator, they would be powerless and could only temporarily leave to find a place to recuperate. However, Li was not afraid of this at all. The stronger reaction from his innate skill tree had already disappeared. Clearly, the poison that had invaded his body had been completely burned away. He looked up and saw that countless pieces of flesh were reassembling, quickly piecing together the silhouettes of two cultivators, faintly showing signs of resurrection. Lu Yi did not make a move, but waited instead. After 3 breaths, the two cultivators suddenly burst out with vitality that only the living could have. At this moment, the saber light flashed, and the two cultivators who were almost resurrected were once again annihilated. Resurrection again and again, death again and again. It seemed like they really were immortal and indestructible. However, Lu Yi keenly sensed that the speed of their resurrection was slowing down after each death. After 5 times, it had become very slow, and it took about half an hour for their vitality to show signs of recovery. During the process of their resurrection, Lu Yi also tried to probe their bodies to see if there were any mysteries. However, even if he chopped them into minced meat, he could not find anything. After the 8th time, the two cultivators' resurrection took half an hour, and after their resurrection, the vitality in their bodies was greatly reduced. This made Lu Yi even more certain of his guess. No matter why these two cultivators could be resurrected, they were not really immortal and indestructible. There was a price to pay for their resurrection. After the 12th time, the pieces of flesh in the sky suddenly turned into specks of fluorescent light and disappeared. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment before he realized that Yu Yao had really died in these 2 months. And they were the shadows. When Lu Yi killed them for the first time, he thought that they were also cultivators who came to gain experience. End of chapter. Chapter 1919. Standing in place, Lu Yi muttered to himself for a long time. He faintly felt that this training would be somewhat troublesome. He was not afraid of a simple battle between Yu Yao and Yu Yao. With his current strength, he was basically invincible in the same realm. Even if he encountered the slightly weaker Riguang, it was not as if he had no trump cards. However, the two cultivators who could come back from the dead made him feel troubled. It was the first time he had encountered such existences. Although they were far from being immortal and indestructible, their method of resurrection was shocking enough. Soon after, he recalled that these shadows in the Azura field were condensed from the traces left behind by cultivators of a certain era. They were recreated by the Azura field using its supreme and profound power. In that case, in a certain period of time in history, did those two cultivators really exist? And they said that they were disciples of the great heavenly God, so there were definitely more than 2 such existences. Just how powerful was the great heavenly God? Thinking about it more deeply, if there were such strange shadows in the Azura field, then what about in the starry sky? Were there also such shadows? It was just that the starry sky was too vast, and no one could know everything. Lu Yi secretly rejoiced. He had encountered the disciples of the great heavenly God during his training. If he had encountered them outside, he might have really suffered a loss if he was not careful. He collected his thoughts and turned around to leave. After a short while, he returned to the small village. It was drizzling and the rough man was still squatting under the eaves. Inside the house, a simple woman was holding a baby, gently patting it and humming an unknown lullaby. The baby had already fallen asleep. Seeing Lu Yi return, the woman stood up and handed the baby over. Lu Yi took it and said, "Thank you, madam." The woman had never heard such a title in her life, so she was a little reserved. She waved her hand and said in a low voice, "No need, no need." Then, she thought of something and turned around to pick up an ancient water bag from the table beside her. "There is some breast milk in here. If the baby is hungry, heat it up and feed it to him. But don't make it too hot, or it will hurt him." Lu Yi nodded and put away the water bag. His divine sense rummaged through his storage ring, but he found that there was nothing he could give away. Spirit jades, spirit crystals, and the like were naturally not suitable, let alone treasures. He had no choice but to thank them again. After bidding farewell to the couple, Lu Yi withdrew his precious blood clone, leaped up, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He didn't know where the Cloud Radish Holy Land was, but when he was chatting with the coarse man, he heard about a place called the Cloud Radish Mountain. The man hadn't been there before. After all, it was too far away, so he only gave him a general direction. Lu Yi naturally wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to find it. He was prepared to ask someone along the way. Currently, this realm was not peaceful. There were unknown enemies invading from beyond the heavens, and there were also the so-called Great Deity sect causing chaos within the realm. There was definitely some relationship between the two. As Lu Yi walked forward, he kept thinking about what his mission was. After thinking about it for a while, he felt that it had something to do with resolving the crisis in this realm. However, he had too little information at the moment, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Ignoring the future, his current mission was obviously to send the baby in his arms to the Cloud Radish Holy Land. Perhaps everything would be clear once he reached there. It didn't take much effort for Lu Yi to find the location of the Cloud Radish Holy Land. As long as he entered the Cloud Radish Mountain, he would see the active figures of cultivators from time to time. After casually inquiring, he knew the specific location of the Cloud Radish Holy Land. He could feel that the security here was very tight. There were cultivators from the Cloud Radish Holy Land patrolling everywhere. This made Lu Yi realize that the trouble in this realm might be more serious than he had thought. After explaining his purpose, Lu Yi was led to the Cloud Radish Holy Land by a team of patrolling cultivators. Then he was placed in a guest hall. The baby in his arms cried again. It should be hungry. Lu Yi took out the water bag and slightly urged his spirit power to heat the breast milk inside. Then he wrapped it in his magic power and sent it into the baby's mouth little by little. Now that he had arrived at the Cloud Radish Holy Land, what should he do next? Just as Lu Yi was pondering, he suddenly heard footsteps coming from the side. He turned his head and saw a tall and beautiful woman with a cold temperament walking towards him aggressively. She was wearing a white dress that was covered in blood, but there were no traces of injuries on her body. She gritted her teeth and looked at Lu Yi as if she had some irreconcilable hatred with him. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know what was going on. The woman walked in front of him and lowered her head to look at him. Lu Yi met her gaze. His eyes were clear. The woman looked at the baby in Lu Ye's arms. Then, she turned to another cultivator behind her and said, "Bring the baby over." Another woman with a sword behind her stepped forward and reached out her hand to Lu Yi. Lu Yi blinked and decisively handed the baby over. He heaved a sigh of relief. He had finally handed the baby over. Although he didn't know why the old man wanted him to bring the baby here before he died, as long as he brought the baby over, the mission was completed. As for who to hand the baby over to, Lu Yi didn't know who to hand it over to. Almost as soon as Lu Yi handed over the baby, the tall woman suddenly raised her hand. Lu Yi instinctively wanted to dodge, but after thinking about it, he didn't dodge. This was because he didn't feel any malice from the woman's actions, even though she seemed to hate him to the core. In the next instant, Lu Yi felt his ear being pinched by a warm and soft hand. The tall woman gritted her teeth and said, "You're finally willing to come back, my good junior brother." Lu Yi couldn't help but tilt his head. He immediately understood his identity on this trip. He was this tall woman's junior brother. This was clearly the Azura Fields arrangement. Lu Yi should have known before entering this place. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a problem when he entered this place. The tall woman suddenly frowned. She slowly loosened her grip on Lu Ye's ear and looked at him in surprise. Then she hesitantly asked, "What's wrong?" A thought flashed through Lu Ye's mind. Then he said, "I forgot a lot of things." He had to quickly find out more useful information. Playing the fool was undoubtedly the best method. "You forgot a lot of things?" The tall woman's expression changed. Then, she grabbed Lu Ye's wrist and examined him with rapt attention. After a short while, she looked at Lu Yi. "Do you know who I am?" Lu Yi shook his head. He really didn't know. A pained expression immediately appeared in the woman's eyes. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Then you definitely don't know who you are?" Lu Yi still shook his head. The woman's beautiful eyes were already filled with mist. At this moment, her cold expression blossomed like water. She sighed and stepped forward. She hugged Lu Yi and gently patted his back as if she was coaxing a child. "It's okay. Let's go home. Everything will be fine from now on." Lu Yi felt his cheeks being wrapped in too astonishing softness. After a short while, Lu Yi finally figured out his identity on this trip. The current holy disciple of the Cloud Vine Holy Land. Compared to his previous identity, this identity was undoubtedly much more righteous. Lu Yi was very satisfied. At least the Azura field had some humanity this time. He finally didn't have to be an evil person. As for the tall woman, she was his senior sister, Sun Nianyue. Many years ago, this holy disciple Lu Yi had left the Cloud Vine Holy Land for some unknown reason. Since then, there had been no news of him. Only today did he suddenly return. It could be seen that Sun Nianyue was extremely good to this junior brother of hers. All of the changes in her emotions just now were her true feelings. "Your child?" Sun Nianyue looked at the baby in the arms of the sword-wielding woman. Lu Yi shook his head and said, "An old man entrusted him to me before he died. He asked me to bring him here. I guess the child's relatives might be here." Sun Nianyue understood. This realm is currently facing external and internal problems. Who knows how many sects have been destroyed? The Holy Land has become the core of the resistance against external enemies. 80% of this realm's cultivators have gathered here to listen to orders. There are also some who have fled here. I'll send someone to look for him. Perhaps there will be some clues. That's good. Lu Yi nodded. Sun Nianyue's arrangement was undoubtedly suitable. Then he asked, "What's going on with this realm?" Sun Nianyue's expression darkened. She immediately explained to Lu Yi in detail. After her explanation, Lu Yi finally understood the background of this trip. This was the final Soul Realm, located in a relatively rich star system. This star system had several large star domains. A few years ago, a group of uninvited guests arrived and caused a conflict. When the news spread, several large star domains immediately decided to join forces to resist the enemy. They each mobilized cultivators from their own star domains to form an allied army and fought against the external enemies in the starry sky. When the war was intense and both sides suffered casualties, the final Soul Realm was also invaded. Caught off guard, this realm suffered a great loss. Fortunately, Sunshine, who was left behind to guard this realm, reacted quickly and immediately adopted a corresponding countermeasure. Right now, the Sunshine Powerhouse led this realm's cultivators to form a defensive line outside the realm. Even so, many enemies still managed to infiltrate this realm, killing and destroying all kinds of things in the realm. Those enemies are very strange and very dangerous. Sun Nianyue's tone was heavy. Lu Yi said, "Do they almost have an immortal body? No matter how serious their injuries are, they can recover very quickly." "You encountered them?" Sun Nianyue looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Lu Yi nodded. Sun Nianyue said, "Yes, their recovery ability is extremely terrifying. Even a decapitation wound can't kill them. If you want to kill them completely, you can only kill them many times in a short period of time until they can't take it anymore. They call themselves Heavenly God's disciples and often mention the name of Great Heavenly God." Lu Yi had personally experienced the strangeness of these so-called Heavenly God's disciples. Naturally, he knew how difficult it was to deal with them. Not every cultivator had the ability to kill enemies as quickly as he did. With the recovery ability of those heavenly gods' disciples, if there was no way to kill them many times in a short period of time, even if they were stronger than the enemy, they would slowly be tortured to death. Is there no way to kill them in one blow? Lu Yi asked. Sun Yinyue said, this is the direction we need to look for. Chapter 1920. In the hall, Lu Yi and Sun Yinyue had a detailed discussion, and he had a vague insight. His next goal should be to find a way to quickly kill Empyrean god apprentices. If he could find it, then this experience would be a great harvest. Just as he was thinking this, Sun Yinyue suddenly glanced at the mountain pandao at his waist, her gaze complicated. It's been so many years, and you're still carrying it? Lu Yi was stunned. The mountain pandao. Did it have a special origin in this training scene? Sun Yinyue sighed. We're weak medical cultivators, junior brother. We only care about saving the dying and healing the injured, we don't need to fight. You were like this in the past. You were clearly talented in the medical path, but you chose to walk the path of a soldier cultivator, which made Master unhappy. Now you're still, so I'm a weak medical cultivator? Lu Yi blinked. Was there really something wrong with the Azura field? How could he know anything about the medical path? Why was he given such an identity in this training? He felt helpless. However, Sun Yinyue did say that the reason why the cultivators of the Netherworld realm treated the Cloud Radish sacred ground as the core to resist the foreign enemies was because it was a famous medical holy land in the entire realm. The fierce confrontation was destined to cause many injuries, and the injured cultivators would return here to seek treatment. Now, all the medical cultivators of the Netherworld realm were gathered here. Lu Ye's current identity was the Holy Son of the Cloud Radish sacred ground, so his talent in the medical path was naturally extraordinary. But in fact, he didn't know anything about it. Sun Yinyue was also a medical cultivator, and she was the most accomplished one in the entire Netherworld realm. The bloodstains on her body were all from saving people. Forget it. If you like it, then take it. Sun Yinyue was undoubtedly very tolerant of Lu Yi. Since you've just returned, you should go and rest first. Zhai Xinglu is still the same as before. Back then, after you left, Master would often go there. Every time, she would be depressed. I'll arrange another guard for you later. Lu Yi keenly realized something and asked, where's Master? This Master must be a sunshine expert. Because his cultivation wasn't weak, and Sun Yinyue seemed to be at the late stage of the Moon Jade realm. Given the size of the Yunluo sacred ground, there were definitely Sunshine Realm cultivators. Sun Yinyue explained, Master went out to fight with the Realm Lord. But don't worry, news just came back a few days ago. Although the battle over there is intense, Master is only in charge of treatment and doesn't need to go into battle to kill the enemy. From the looks of it, his master was indeed a medical cultivator. Sun Yinyue sent a message to the outside. Immediately, a cultivator walked in from outside. It was a very cute girl. When she got close, she said in a crisp voice, Senior sister. Sun Yinyue nodded. Duo, take your senior brother to Zhai Xinglu, yes. The girl called Duo hurriedly responded, then looked at Lu Yi, Senior brother, please follow me. Lu Yi left with her. Zhai Xinglu was not far from here. It was on another spiritual peak. Along the way, Duo led the way, occasionally turning her head to look at Lu Yi. Her clear eyes were full of curiosity. You know me? Lu Yi asked. Duo said, Senior brother, you don't remember me? I've forgotten what happened before. Duo suddenly showed a sympathetic look and said, I'm Aki Duo. I entered the sect with you before. Senior brother, you saved me before. As he said this, he lifted his shirt and put on an innocent look. Look, you're the one who helped to treat the injuries here. Lu Yi glanced at her and found that there was indeed a faint scar on the side of her waist, but it was still conspicuous because of her snow-white and delicate skin. The scar was very long and should have been quite serious back then. There were many cultivators flying around nearby. Aki Duo's action immediately attracted many pairs of eyes. Lu Yi was speechless. Put down your clothes. Little girl, what a scandal. Oh! Aki Duo hurriedly put down her clothes. Not long after, they arrived at Jianghu. Lu Aki Duo led Lu Yi here and left. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the entire Jianghu had 9 floors and was about 300 feet high. There was only one building in this huge spirit mountain. In front of the building was a huge platform square. There was no aura of life in the building. It seemed that this place was not open to the public. Since he was here, Lu Yi stepped toward Jianghu and temporarily stayed in a room on the first floor. Sitting cross-legged on the praying mat, Lu Yi's mind was immersed in investigating the movement of the talent tree. Most of the bad luck added to his body by the dice of fate had been burned away. Moreover, Lu Yi discovered one thing. The bad luck added to his body this time did not seem to be very strong. It only allowed him to pick up a baby at the beginning and then meet 2 disciples of God. The rest of the journey was peaceful. According to the current progress, it should take another day for the power of misfortune to be completely burned out. This was a small problem. The biggest problem he needed to face now was this experience. Because the Azura field did not provide any information and intelligence, Lu Yi could only cross the river by feeling the stones. He had to explore everything by himself. Sending the baby to the Yunluo Holy Land was only the first step. Through the conversation with Sun Yinyue, Lu Yi already knew what he should do next. He was not in a hurry. To be on the safe side, he had to wait until the power of misfortune was completely burned out. A day passed by quickly. Lu Yi stood up and walked out after he sensed that the talent tree was no longer acting strangely. However, as soon as he walked out, a figure descended from the sky and landed directly in front of him. Lu Yi looked carefully and found that it was a kiddo. Senior brother. Lu Yi nodded. What's the matter? A kiddo said, Senior sister Sun said that if senior brother has rested well, please go to the Renyuan Valley. There are many injured people there who need to be treated. Lu Yi suddenly felt a headache. He was good at killing people, but how could he know how to save people? He secretly rejoiced that he had the foresight to give Sun Yinyue the impression that he had completely lost his memory when he saw her. Since he had lost his memory, it was normal for him to forget about medicine. He had to explain it to Sun Yinyue face to face. Otherwise, this senior sister would probably rely on him to help. Let's go. With that said, Lu Yi and Aikido flew toward the Renyuan Valley. The Renyuan Valley was very large. It was originally a place where cultivators in need of treatment came to the Yunluo Holy Land for treatment. Now, it was used as a place to treat the injured cultivators from the battle. Although cultivators of the upper realm were full of vitality and energy, and could recover from ordinary injuries on their own. Yu Yao could even regrow a severed arm. However, their speed of recovery was naturally not as fast as that of medical cultivators. In such a great battle, the number of medical cultivators and the strength of their skills would affect the direction of the battle to a certain extent. Now, all the medical cultivators in the final Soul Realm were gathered in the Yunluo Holy Land. When Lu Yi arrived at the Renyuan Valley, he found that there were busy cultivators everywhere. The smell of blood filled the air. Sun Yinyue was busy in one place. She activated her magic power, and a gentle power wrapped around a cultivator who had lost an arm in front of her. The cultivator's face was full of pain, and sweat dripped from his forehead. There was no sign of flesh and blood growing from the severed arm. Instead, there was some black mist lingering around it. Even the cultivator's face was a little gloomy. This immediately reminded Lu Yi of the strangeness of the disciples of God. Their magic power was very strange. Lu Yi had felt it when he was fighting with the 2 disciples of God. This cultivator who was being treated was obviously injured by the disciples of God. Senior sister. Lu Yi came to Sun Yinyue's side and stood still. Sun Yinyue turned to look at him. Come and take over. I'll teach you how to detoxify the poison. The magic power of those disciples of God is strange. If you don't deal with it first, it will be difficult to recover. After saying that, she immediately took a step back. Seeing that Lu Yi was still standing in the same place, she couldn't help but urge, don't be in a daze. Lu Yi originally wanted to explain to Sun Nianyue that he didn't have the means to save people. What he needed to do now was to find a way to quickly kill the disciples of God. This was definitely an important direction for this experience. But after seeing the situation of this cultivator with a severed arm, he suddenly realized something. Under normal circumstances, the identity that the Shuraba arranged for cultivators was basically based on the cultivator's previous performance. It wouldn't be too outrageous. For example, a constellation cultivator. Even if the Shuraba arranged an identity for him as Sunshine, he wouldn't be able to exert that kind of power. Such a paper tiger naturally wouldn't have a good ending when he entered the experience scene. In this experience, the identity that the Shuraba arranged for him was a medical cultivator. Lu Yi originally felt that something was wrong, but now he finally understood why there was such an arrangement. He had previously received a few bounty missions to detoxify people in the bounty hall. Because he had shown the ability to detoxify people, he was given such an identity as a medical cultivator. So that was the case. Lu Ye's heart suddenly understood. This made sense. As his thoughts turned, he stepped forward and raised his hand to put it on the shoulder of the cultivator with a severed arm. Sun Nianyue's voice sounded in his ear. The disciple of God's mana is like a kind of poison, but it's not a poison at all. It has the strange ability to devour other people's mana to strengthen itself. Only the medical cultivator's means can suppress and detoxify it. So, there are injured Taoists sent here. What we need to do is... As she spoke, Sun Nianyue's voice gradually grew weaker and weaker, and her eyes slowly widened. Because she saw an extremely incredible scene. The strange power of the disciple of God, which she felt was extremely difficult to deal with, was actually disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. She only spoke for a few breaths of time, but in just this short period of time, the black fog lingering around the wound of the cultivator with a severed arm, along with the obscurity on his face, disappeared without a trace. The cultivator with a severed arm also clearly felt the changes in his body. The original hardships quickly disappeared, and his expression became calm and peaceful. His cultivation was not ordinary. As long as he resolved the disciple of God's mana, the remaining injuries were nothing to him. End of this chapter. Chapter 1921. The flesh and blood on the broken arm wriggled, and granulation grew out. This was undoubtedly the self-healing of a powerful body, and it also showed that the strange power of the enlightened disciple had been completely resolved. Sun Nianyue suddenly turned her head to look at Lu Yi, and her face was full of disbelief. She had no idea what her junior brother had done to have such an immediate effect. The one-armed cultivator opened his eyes and looked at Lu Yi with admiration. This fellow cultivator has extraordinary skills. How may I address you? He had been fighting in this world for several years and was repeatedly injured by the enlightened disciple, but there had never been a medical cultivator who could help him solve his problems so quickly. Sun Nianyue came back to her senses, suppressed the shock in her heart, and proudly said, "This is my junior brother." The one-armed cultivator was surprised. "Are you the miracle medical sage Lu Yi?" Lu Ye's mouth twitched. He didn't know that he had such a famous name. He didn't know about it at all. But then again, miracle medical sage was much more pleasant to the ear than sect destroyer Yi. "Yes, junior brother just returned from his travels a few days ago," Sun Nianyue explained. The one-armed cultivator probably wanted to salute but found that he couldn't do it without an arm, so he could only nod to Lu Yi. "I've heard a lot about you. Today I see that you really live up to your reputation." "You flatter me." Lu Yi blushed with shame. Sun Nianyue stepped forward and began to heal the one-armed cultivator. She turned to Lu Yi and said, "Junior brother, since you have the means to quickly resolve the power of the enlightened disciple, why don't you take care of this matter?" She originally wanted to test whether her junior brother's medical skills had improved in the years he had been missing, but now it seemed that there was no need to test him. She was far inferior to his magical skills, and even her master couldn't do it. Her junior brother was really a genius, born to save lives and heal the wounded. Sun Nianyue's proposal was undoubtedly what Lu Yi wanted. He couldn't save people because he didn't have the means to do so. But it was just to resolve the strange power of the enlightened disciple, which was too easy for him. He immediately nodded. But 80% of the injured cultivators in the Rinyuan Valley had the strange power of the divine disciple left in their bodies. This was the biggest problem for medical practitioners to treat them. Before Lu Yi appeared, all medical practitioners had to spend a lot of energy and time to solve this problem. In fact, only a small part of the time was spent on treating the injured cultivators. Because they were all cultivators in the upper realm, as long as the strange power of the divine disciple was resolved, with the assistance of medical practitioners, coupled with their own recovery ability and spirit pills, it was not difficult to recover. Lu Yi walked and stopped in the Rinyuan Valley. With the help of the talent tree, he helped one cultivator after another to resolve the strange power of the divine disciple. This matter was beneficial to him. Although there was no information to guide him, Lu Yi could feel that this was also a training mission for him. The better he completed it, the more Azura seals he could obtain. Moreover, no matter what his mission was this time, he had to win this battle against the divine disciple. Helping the practitioners on his side to recover quickly was undoubtedly a kind of help. Only half a day later, the name of the miracle healers spread far and wide. With Lu Ye's help, the number of injured cultivators in Rinyuan Valley rapidly decreased. Those who had recovered quickly rushed out of the boundary and joined the battle again. At the same time, outside the final serene world, there was a huge palace with cultivators constantly coming in and out. This place was the foundation of the final serene world's external defense line. The entire galaxy had been invaded by foreign enemies. The largest battlefield was in the depths of the starry sky. However, every boundary in the galaxy had its own battlefield. Sitting in this palace was a sunshine cultivator from the final serene world called Tianhong. He was also the only sunshine cultivator to stay in the final serene world. The others, such as the Holy Lord of the Cloud Radish Holy Land, had followed the Realm Lord out to fight. At this moment, he was looking through a lot of information in his hands, frowning from time to time. After several years of fighting, the situation was still unclear. Their world had suffered a lot of losses, but the enemy showed no signs of retreating. The main reason was that the divine disciple was too difficult to kill. So far, they had not found a way to kill him in one blow. Especially Sunshine, who was on the opposite side. In terms of strength, he was stronger than him. He had killed him as many as 3 times, but he could quickly recover each time. However, because of the divine disciple's strange immortal body, he could not kill him. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he saw a piece of information that he was interested in. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Pass the order, ask the left front general to come back and see me." The cultivator immediately responded and sent out the message. After waiting for about half an hour, a burly figure stepped in from the outside. Wrapped in a shocking murderous aura, his body was covered in blood. It was obvious that he had gone through a battle. This was the left front general, the strongest cultivator under Tianhong's command. The left front general cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, Lord Tianhong." Tianhong nodded slightly. "There is a mission for you to do." The left front general said in a deep voice, "Please give the order, Lord." His eyebrows were filled with eagerness. This experience was extremely strange. Everything was confusing. Now that he finally had a clear mission, he secretly decided that even if the other party wanted him to assassinate that disciple of Rizhao Heavenly God, he would give it a try. Return to this world and go to the Yunluo Holy Ground. Protect the current Holy Son of the Yunluo Holy Ground. Do not let anything happen to him. Tianhong ordered. The left front general thought that he had misheard and could not help but ask, "Lord, you want me to protect the Holy Son of the Yunluo Holy Ground? I am the strongest cultivator under your command, Yu Yao. You don't want me to charge and kill the enemy, but you want me to protect someone?" "That's right." Tianhong replied, "There is no time to lose. Let's go now." The left front general's mouth twitched, but in the end he was speechless. This was a mission that he had clearly received, and he could not reject it. Moreover, judging from Tianhong's tone, he was afraid that he could not reject it. "Your killing intent is too strong. When you reach the Yunluo holy ground, restrain yourself. 90% of this world's medical cultivators are gathered there. They are all weak cultivators who do not participate in battles. Do not scare them. When you return, go find Sun Nianyue and listen to her arrangements. Tianhong was worried and reminded him. Understood. The left front general replied. He turned around and left the main hall of the palace. He rubbed his big bald head and helplessly flew towards the final soul world. He was in the middle of killing enemies when he was suddenly summoned back to be a bodyguard. This made him feel very unhappy. After a while, the left front general entered the final world and entered the Yunluo holy ground. After asking around, he found Sun Nianyue, who was treating the wounded and dying in the Renyuan Valley. When they met face to face, Sun Nianyue suddenly felt very safe when she saw his huge physique and ferocious face. She originally wanted to arrange another Yu Yao to be her junior brother's bodyguard. However, after her junior brother displayed his miraculous skills, she knew that her arrangement was inappropriate. She immediately sent a message to Tianhong in the outer realm, asking him to help find a more suitable bodyguard. The person in front of her should have been arranged by Martial Uncle Tianhong. After a simple conversation, the left front general flew toward Zhai Xinglu. At Zhai Xinglu, Lu Yi had returned. He had finished treating the injured cultivators in the Renyuan Valley. Then, Sun Nianyue, his senior sister, rushed him back to rest and recuperate. In Sun Nianyue's opinion, although her junior brother's method of dealing with the strange power of the enlightened disciples was marvelous, it must have consumed a lot of energy. After treating so many cultivators in such a short period of time, he naturally needed to rest. This was exactly what Lu Yi wanted. If Sun Nianyue really asked him to help treat her injuries, he really did not know what to do. Next, he only needed to stroll around the Renyuan Valley every day and help the injured cultivators deal with the power of the enlightened disciples. The rest would be to explore and find a way to kill the enlightened disciples in one strike. In this way, he had to catch an enlightened disciple to study. Although he had killed 2 enlightened gods' disciples and carefully examined their condition after death, he did not study it too deeply. Such research had been done many times in the final world. When he left the Renyuan Valley just now, he mentioned it to Sun Nianyue. Sun Nianyue told him to come back and wait. She would order someone to send the information of the previous research. Not long after, a familiar voice called out, "Senior brother. Come in." Lu Yi recognized Akijuo's voice. Akijuo pushed the door and entered, then handed Lu Yi a few jade slips. "This is what senior sister's son asked me to give you." Lu Yi took it and nodded. "Thank you for your hard work." Akijuo smiled sweetly. "It's not hard. Senior brother, I'm leaving." "Go ahead." After Akijuo left, Lu Yi was about to check the information in the jade slip when he suddenly felt a powerful aura quickly approaching. Lu Ye's first reaction was that someone was sneaking up on him, but after sensing the aura he suddenly frowned because this aura was inexplicably familiar. A loud bang came from the square outside, followed by a familiar loud voice. "Where is Holy Child Yunluo?" He was naturally unhappy that he had been sent back to be a bodyguard, but he couldn't refuse. After thinking about it, the best way was to show his fierceness and make Saint Child Yunluo fear him. It would be best if Saint Child Yunluo took the initiative to change his bodyguard. A weak medical cultivator, if he casually scared him, he would definitely be scared out of his wits. Thinking of this, his expression became more and more ferocious, and he bared his teeth as if he was going to eat someone. Then he saw a head poking out from the front door. His expression suddenly became much more ferocious, as if he was really an evil spirit descending into the world. His ferocious face suddenly became startled, and the corners of his eyes could not help but tremble. He could not help but recall all kinds of things in the battlefield. For a moment he thought he was seeing things. He raised his hand to rub his eyes and found that he was not seeing things. "Ah!" The two of them both exclaimed in surprise, obviously not expecting to meet each other here, and in such a way. Lu Yi walked out of the star-picking tower and smiled gently at the left front general. "What a coincidence, we meet again." The left front general frowned. completely sure of Lu Ye's identity. He suddenly recalled Tianhong's evaluation before leaving. Was this the so-called weak medical cultivator that he needed to protect? Was there a mistake somewhere? End of chapter. Chapter 1922. In the stargazing pavilion, Lu Yi and the left front general sat across from each other in silence. However, the left front general was rather speechless as he looked at Lu Yi. What was going on over at Tianhong's side? This person in front of him was even stronger than him. Why would he need his protection? With Lu Ye's strength, unless Rizhao personally intervened, Yu Yao probably wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike from him. After all, he had personally experienced Lu Ye's strength. Fellow Taoist Luo, Lu Yi suddenly said. The left front general was taken aback at first, but he quickly reacted. My name is Abdullah. Lu Yi nodded. Fellow Taoist Luo, it's fate that brought us together. Also, it seems like we're on the same side for this trial, so we're considered companions. Why don't we exchange information? There were many things that he didn't understand. He originally wanted to find an opportunity to find a cultivator to ask about the situation, but who would have thought that Abdullah would suddenly appear in front of him? He just didn't know why this guy had such a fierce expression when they first met. Abdullah sighed. Call me whatever you want. We can exchange information, of course, but I don't have much information on my side. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Abdullah frowned. This trial is a little strange. I've never encountered such a situation before. When I entered the trial scene this time, I waited in the darkness for a long time. Moreover, the Azura field didn't provide any useful information, so I was directly thrown in. You too? Lu Yi looked at him in shock. Abdullah said, Too? Could it be? Lu Yi nodded. Me too. Through Abdullah's description, he undoubtedly knew that Abdullah had experienced the same thing as him before entering this trial scene. At first, he only felt that something was a little off, but now it seemed that there really was something wrong with the Azura field, right? This is interesting. Abro stroked his chin in contemplation. Unlike Lu Yi, he had been here for many years and had entered and exited various training grounds countless times, but none of them were as strange as this one. Then tell me what information you have, Lu Yi said. Abdullah naturally didn't hide anything and immediately told him everything. Lu Yi listened carefully, and then realized that he knew more or less the same things as himself. The only thing he knew was that the cultivators of this star system were currently fighting against foreign enemies in outer space, and that the battle in this world was also intense. Abdullah's identity was Yu Yao, the strongest subordinate of Tianhong. Before he was summoned back, he had been fighting outside. He had personally experienced the strangeness of the disciples of gods. They were extremely difficult to kill. Even if those disciples of gods were smashed into pieces, they could quickly recover. Only after dying a certain number of times would they truly die. After Abdullah finished speaking, Lu Yi reported the information he had gathered. After a brief discussion, Abdullah said, According to my experience and deduction, we only have one main mission this time. I'd like to hear the details. Lu Yi humbly asked for guidance. In terms of experience in the Azura arena, Abdullah was definitely much more experienced than him. Assist the cultivators of this world in protecting the final soul realm. Lu Ye's eyes flashed when he heard this. What about the main battlefield in the starry skies? Even if the final soul realm is protected, if the main battlefield loses, how can any eggs remain intact when the nest is overturned? Abdullah said, Brother Lu, you have to understand that there is no such thing as a sure-death situation in the Azura arena. No matter how dangerous the situation is, there is always a chance of survival. Otherwise, the original purpose of the experience would be lost. What are we? We are Yu Yao, the main battlefield in the depths of the starry skies. If we rashly intervene, how can we have a good end? Although there are also disciples of gods in outer space, there is Tianhong suppressing them. In fact, as long as we are careful, we won't encounter them directly. After pausing for a moment, Abdullah said earnestly, Brother, let me teach you a good lesson. In this Azura arena, do as much as you can. Don't be too far-sighted, or you'll easily suffer losses. Lu Yi nodded. Understood. In that case, this experiential learning mission was indeed not too dangerous. As long as he could assist Tianhong in protecting the final soul realm, the experiential learning should be considered complete. He originally wanted to find a way to kill the disciples of gods in one blow, but if that was the case, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Brother Lu? Abdullah looked at him eagerly. It was obvious that he had sensed Lu Sheng's intentions. Let's go, Lu Yi said. That's the way it should be. Abdullah laughed and got up. The two left Jai Xinglu together and flew straight into outer space. Outside Jai Xinglu, a Qi duo looked at the two leaving figures, and a strange silver light flashed in his eyes. Brother Lu, today you and I will join forces and kill those disciples of gods. The sooner we finish, the sooner we go back, I will treat you to a drink. Abdullah shouted as he flew. For him, disciples of gods were not difficult to kill. It was just a matter of killing them a few times. Now that he had Lu Yi, who was stronger than him, to join forces, he couldn't think of any chance of the enemy winning. As for the mission of protecting Lu Yi, it was something he didn't need to worry about. However, what the two did not expect was that as soon as they left the boundary, they suddenly saw a figure blocking their way. Abdullah's figure paused and he hurriedly stopped. Lu Yi also stopped, looking dignified. Although the figure blocking them did not reveal any aura, he still felt a little heavy. He had seen many big and small Rizhao, so he could tell at a glance that the other party was definitely Rizhao. Tianhong? Or Rizhao's disciple? In this position, it was most likely Tianhong. Sure enough, Abdullah saluted. Greetings, Lord Tianhong. Lu Yi also saluted. Tianhong was a thin old man, standing there with his hands behind his back. He looked at Lu Yi and then at Abdullah. Where are you going? Abdullah immediately replied, Lord, we are going to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Tianhong immediately scolded, Nonsense. Left Front General, I asked you to protect Saint Yun Luo, is this how you protect him? If something happens to him on the battlefield, can you bear the responsibility? Abdullah explained, Lord, you may not know, but Saint Yun Luo and I have known each other for a long time. In fact, his strength. Don't talk too much, hurry up and return to the inner realm. It is not safe outside. Tianhong waved his hand, too lazy to listen to Abdullah's nonsense. He looked at Lu Yi, his stern expression gradually softening. You are the best medical cultivator in this realm. Only with you in charge of this realm can the soldiers be at ease to kill the enemy outside. So remember, your safety is not only related to you, but also the future of this realm. When he said this, Lu Yi suddenly felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. Tianhong looked at Abdullah again, and his tone suddenly became more serious. Protect him well. If you dare to neglect your duty again, I will personally deal with you. After saying this, he turned and left, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Lu Yi and Abdullah looked at each other. After a while, Abdullah scratched his bald head. What the hell is going on? Tianhong actually appeared. This was something he did not expect at all. Moreover, it was such a coincidence that as soon as they left the outer realm, Tianhong accurately intercepted them. Of course, he could not ignore Rizhao's words. Rizhao obviously did not want them to go out to kill the enemy. If he forced them to leave, Tianhong would definitely not sit back and watch. Facing Rizhao, he was still a little afraid. But in his opinion, as long as he and Lu Yi worked together, the crisis of Final Realm could be easily solved. Of course, the premise was that Tianhong took action to restrain Rizhao's disciple. Let's go back first. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then turned and flew back to the inner realm. Returning to Stargazing Tower, Abdullah was extremely irritated, pacing back and forth. Lu Yi sat cross-legged, his thoughts gradually becoming clear. Originally, he also thought that with Abdullah's help, it would not be difficult to solve the problem of Final Realm, but now it seemed that he had underestimated the matter. Therefore, he still had to study a way to kill a heavenly god disciple. As long as he could figure out this method, not to mention the crisis of Final Realm, even the crisis of the entire galaxy could be easily solved. At that time, the Azura seal he could obtain would undoubtedly be much larger than solving the crisis of Final Realm alone. Thinking of this, he took out the jade slips that Aki Duo had sent before and checked them one by one. These were all the various research on heavenly god disciples in this realm, studying how to quickly kill them. Several jade slips were quickly read. It had to be said that in the direction of heavenly god disciples, the cultivators of this realm had made many different attempts, but without exception, they all failed. It seemed that the only way to kill a heavenly god disciple was to kill them a certain number of times. He looked up at the irritated Abdullah. "Brother Luo, sit down first, I have something to ask you." Hearing this, Abdullah came over and sat down. "You've killed a lot of heavenly god disciples, did you find anything?" Lu Yi asked. Before the two met, Abdullah was the left front general of the battlefield. The number of heavenly god disciples who died at his hands should not be small. Abdullah thought for a moment and said, "It's very difficult to kill, but you can kill them a few times. And depending on the cultivation base, the number of times a heavenly god disciple can be resurrected is different. The lower the cultivation base, the fewer times they can be resurrected." Lu Yi already knew about this information. He had seen it in those jade slips. Also, you have to kill a heavenly god disciple after they are completely resurrected and full of vitality to reduce the number of times they can be resurrected, Abdullah added. If you kill them before they are full of vitality, it's useless no matter how many times you kill them. There was a process to the resurrection of a heavenly god disciple. First, the broken body quickly became complete, and then the vitality suddenly burst out. If you only kill a heavenly god disciple when the body is complete, it will not reduce the number of times they can be resurrected at all. Lu Yi fell into deep thought. Generally speaking, the recovery of a cultivator's injuries consumed the power of qi and blood and their own vitality. How could a heavenly god disciple have so much vitality to consume? This matter was very strange. If you want to explore it, you have to try it yourself. "Brother Luo, help me catch a few heavenly god disciples," Lu Yi said. "Tianhong won't let us go out." "Don't worry." Lu Yi gave him a comforting look. "Tianhong just won't let me go out. You should be able to go by yourself. Catching a few heavenly god disciples will be a piece of cake for you." Chapter 1923. In the end, Abdullah could not resist Lu Ye's persuasion and left alone, preparing to capture a few disciples of the enlightened master for him to study. While waiting, Lu Yi received a message from Sun Nianyue that another group of injured cultivators had retreated from the alien battlefield. Many of them were injured by the disciples of the enlightened master and needed his help. Lu Yi immediately rushed to Renyuan Valley. Just like before, he activated the power of the talent tree and easily solved the problem. Many cultivators were grateful to him. When he returned to Zhai Xinglu, Abdullah had already returned. He gritted his teeth and looked at Lu Yi. "I will never believe your nonsense again." "What happened?" Lu Yi was stunned. "Tianhong scolded me severely. The battle merits I worked so hard to earn were reduced by 50%. Lu Yi looked sympathetic. "Didn't you tell him that I asked you to go out?" "I told him, but it was useless." Abdullah was infuriated. He had never been treated like this in a training exercise before. In the past, he had always been the cornerstone of the team. Even if there was sunshine in the training grounds, he would always be the one that sunshine could rely on. But this time, he met Lu Yi. Compared to Lu Ye's importance, he was like a pawn that could be abandoned at will. Lu Yi was the most precious one. Then again, before Tianhong asked him to come back to protect Lu Yi, Tianhong was really good to him. Every time he returned from a battle, Tianhong would reward him greatly, saying that there would be people in the netherworld realm in the future. But compared to before, the treatment now was like heaven and earth. "What about the disciples of the enlightened master?" Lu Yi asked. Abdullah said angrily, "Tianhong said he would send someone to send them over." "That's good." Lu Yi nodded. After a while, there were indeed cultivators who sent back a few captured disciples of the enlightened master. Lu Yi began to study them without stopping. In the next few days, he first reproduced the direction that the cultivators of the netherworld realm had studied one by one, such as cutting the disciples of the enlightened master into pieces and burning them with fire. It was not that he did not believe in the cultivators of the netherworld realm, but some things were not comprehensive enough unless he tried it himself. From time to time, he would be called over by Sun Ninyue to help treat her injuries. In the past, what the cultivators feared the most was the corrosion of the magic power of a heavenly deity disciple. But now, with Lu Yi overseeing the rear, the cultivators no longer had any misgivings. On the battlefield, they were much more ferocious in killing their enemies. For a time, the morale of the netherworld cultivators soared. On the other hand, Lu Ye's research had not made any progress. He had changed several batches of heavenly god disciples, ranging from Xing Su to Yu Yao, but he had not made any substantial discoveries. On this day, Lu Yi was helping people heal in the Renyuan Valley, and Abdo was guarding beside him out of boredom. A figure suddenly walked over. "Senior brother." Lu Yi looked up and nodded slightly. "Junior sister Duo. Thank you for your hard work, senior brother." Akido smiled. "It's my duty." He had been here for several days, but other than healing people, he did not have much contact with outsiders. Only Akijuo would come to talk to him from time to time. It could be seen that this junior sister seemed to worship him. But this time, Lu Yi found that Akido's expression was a little unnatural, as if she was a little nervous. "Junior sister, what's the matter?" Lu Yi asked while urging the power of the talent tree to heal people. Akido shook her head. Lu Yi glanced at her doubtfully, but then again, he did not know for the time being whether Akido was a shadow or a cultivator who participated in the experience. Based on his judgment, Akido was not old, but now she had the cultivation of Yu Yao, which showed that her talent was outstanding. Just as he was pondering, a commotion suddenly came from not far away. Surging magic power suddenly burst out, and screams suddenly sounded. Abdo, who had been guarding beside Lu Yi, was bored. His eyes lit up, and he rushed over with his fists raised. "I knew you would come." In the past few days, Abdo had also mentioned to Lu Yi that now that his reputation was gradually spreading, the heavenly god disciples would definitely notice his existence and target him. In the netherworld, there were also many heavenly god disciples who had infiltrated in secretly, such as the two that Lu Yi first encountered. So Lu Yi was likely to be attacked by the heavenly god disciples. Now the prophecy came true, and the heavenly god disciples really came. Although the Yunluo Holy Land's defense was tight, the heavenly god disciples were no different from ordinary cultivators when they did not act. Now the Yunluo Holy Land had gathered cultivators from all over the domain, so it was difficult to screen. Normally, the heavenly god disciples would not take such risks, but Lu Ye's special ability was enough to make them risk their lives. Abdo rushed out excitedly, without the slightest awareness of being a guard. "Senior brother, come with me." Just as Lu Yi was looking in that direction, an anxious voice sounded by his ear. Immediately after, a warm and soft hand grabbed him. Turning his head, he found that it was Akido who was nervously dragging him. "No need." Lu Yi smiled gently, but as soon as his voice fell, his eyes narrowed, because at this moment, a powerful aura that belonged to Rizhao suddenly spread out. Lu Ye's eyes were instantly fixed on a middle-aged cultivator who was rushing over there. At this moment, the middle-aged cultivator was surrounded by many heavenly god disciples, and the scene was chaotic. When Lu Yi looked at him, the other party happened to look at Lu Yi. When their eyes met, Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. Abdo was rushing toward the middle-aged cultivator, and the excitement and joy on his face suddenly turned stiff when he realized that the other party was Rizhao. "Found him." The middle-aged cultivator's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness, and he fiercely slapped at Abdo. The powerful barbarian from the ancient barbarian world suddenly flew away like a kite with a broken string. Lu Yi didn't even look back as he followed Akido and flew forward. "This way." Akido still grabbed his hand and led him to fly in a direction. However, after only 3 breaths, Lu Yi suddenly stopped. "It's too late, you have to go." Rizhao had his eyes on him. How could he let him escape? Fortunately, he was not completely powerless. He still had 2 red talismans on him. One was for escaping, and the other was a talisman of killing. The talisman of killing was given to him by Su Yuqing for self-defense when he decided to come to the Azura arena. When he felt that something was wrong, he had secretly activated the power of the red talisman. Tianhong was just outside the realm, so he didn't need to do too much. He just needed to hold on for a little while, and Tianhong would come back. At this moment, Lu Yi deeply felt the danger of the Shuraba experience. It didn't mean that one could sit back and relax just because they were strong enough. Since ancient times, so many evildoers had gathered in the Shuraba. There was always a higher mountain than the one before, unless one's strength could stand at the top of the long river of history. Moreover, Yu Yao was not the leader of this experience. At this moment, a figure flashed in front of him. It was a kiddo, who had been holding his hand and escaping, suddenly blocked his way. Lu Yi was startled and immediately raised his hand to grab her shoulder, wanting to throw her away. But before he could do anything, a kiddo shouted, "Open!" As soon as she finished speaking, a jade hairpin in her hair suddenly broke, and dots of fluorescent light quickly expanded in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a barrier, enveloping her and Lu Yi. The middle-aged cultivator had already closed in, and the magic power around him surged like a black fog, showing his identity as a divine disciple. He looked cold and fierce, and a mysterious power surged from his palm. There was a loud bang. Lu Yi almost lost his footing, but what surprised him was that Aikido's protective barrier didn't break. Although a crack appeared on the barrier after this attack, it still managed to hold on. That jade hairpin treasure was definitely of high quality. Otherwise, it would not have been able to block Rizhao's attack. It should be known that even Yu Yao, who was as strong as Abdullah, was sent flying by Rizhao's palm. At this moment, Aikido's petite figure stood in front of Lu Yi. Without the restriction of the jade hairpin, her black hair fluttered, and her magic power surged around her. "You overestimate yourself." Rizhao's divine disciple was furious that his attack did not succeed. His magic power surged even more fiercely, and he slammed his palm again. The barrier broke even more, but in the end, it still held. "Senior brother, hurry up and run later. I'll stop him." Aikido clenched her teeth, struggling to hold on. Lu Yi did not have the habit of letting others protect him. Moreover, if the barrier broke, he and Aikido would not be able to leave. Magic power surged, and the power of the red talisman could be released at any time. Lu Yi only needed to wait for the opponent's next attack to give him a surprise. The third attack came quickly. With a crash, the barrier broke, and Aikido spat out blood. Her figure flew out, and her whole body went limp. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed on the hilt of the Pan Mountain saber. Just as he was about to fully activate the power of the red talisman, he suddenly heard an angry shout. "You're courting death." It was the voice of the heavenly rainbow. As the voice sounded, the heavenly rainbow fell from the sky like a ray of light. It grabbed the Rizhao's divine disciple's neck, jumped into the air, and directly took him out of the boundary. The next moment, the aftermath of a violent confrontation came from the sky. It was obvious that the 2 Rizhaos were fighting. Lu Yi turned his head and looked into the distance. His body swayed, and in a few steps, he came to Aikido's side. At this moment, the girl had fallen into a coma. Blood flowed out of her 7 orifices, and her vitality was extremely weak. Her body was surrounded by the magic power of a divine disciple. Her situation was obviously not good. Lu Yi quickly raised his hand and grabbed her wrist. He activated the power of the talent tree. He carefully controlled the power of the talent tree to help her dissolve the corrosion of the divine disciple's magic power. Then he took out a large healing pill and stuffed it into her mouth. He gently patted her to help her swallow it. Then he carried her by the waist and spread out his divine sense to search for Sun Yenyue. In terms of medical attainments, Sun Yenyue was undoubtedly the strongest in this world. Only by finding her could he save Aikido. After a breath, Lu Yi rushed in a direction and quickly came to the side of Sun Yenyue, who was covered in dust. She was not affected too much. The main reason was that the female sword cultivator who had been following her had done her job and blocked the impact of the aftermath for her. "Senior sister, save her," Lu Yi said anxiously. Sun Yinyue shook her head and saw a kiddo in Lu Ye's arms. She quickly came back to her senses. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.